Welcome everyone to CE Summer Conference and the launch event for Community Energy Fortnight. We have a jam-packed 3.5 hours conference for you now. There's going to be some very exciting initiatives being launched today, some ideas from across the channel as well as across the country, and an exploration of how to build fruitful relationships with local authorities, which I'm sure we'll all agree is very important right now. Thank you as ever for dialing in and taking part today. And to the conference sponsor, Community Energy, who we'll hear more from after me, and as well as our supporting sponsors, Electricity North West and Northern Powergrid, who'll be sharing the following sessions. So this is the first time we've used this version of Zoom, so we hope it does make for a more engaging experience, but do bear with us and feedback any thoughts and your experiences to help us shape future events. And we do want to hear from you throughout the day. So if you would like to ask a question, please use the Q&A function, which you can access by clicking on the option at the bottom of the screen. You can also vote for your favourite questions by clicking the thumbs up under each one. This will ensure that the most popular questions go to the panellists. If you'd like to verbally ask a question, then please put verbally in the brackets after your question. The Community Energy England team will be working behind the scenes, monitoring the Q&A box. To help fill questions. If there are a lot of similar questions, we may remove some duplicates. However, we won't be censoring questions unless anyone does post anything inappropriate or mean. And on that note, we'll be taking as many measures as we can to reduce as much as possible the chance of being trolled, but we will eject anyone who goes against the ethos of treating participants with dignity or respect. Feel free to chat in the chat box as well. I think we found that really useful at the spring conference with Community Energy South. Please make sure if you do that, then choose panellists and attendees and everyone can see your chat. And also bear in mind that people can save your chat, so don't say anything in there that you wouldn't normally say in a public arena. If you are on Twitter, please use the hashtag CEConf20. There are a couple of breaks scheduled on the agenda, but we realise that they are quite tight in order to get everything in. So just bear in mind that your, sorry, I got distracted then by looking at chat, so I shouldn't be doing when I'm chairing. Just bear in mind that make sure that your camera and microphone is off, which it should be, so you can go for a break whenever you want, do yoga, put your feet up, whatever you like whilst this conference is going on and we won't know about it. We will be recording the session and sharing it on our brand new YouTube channel. So if you do miss any of this afternoon, you need to leave at any stage, or you know if someone else might find it interesting who couldn't dial in today, then you can watch it back and follow the discussions online afterwards. So just very, very quickly, in case you don't know who Community Energy England is or what we do work very hard to provide a strong unified voice for community energy, support collaboration and help to build the capacity of our members. We work closely with a range of networks and associations, some of which you can see in this slide here. And of course, we wouldn't be able to do what we do without the support of our 250 plus members, so thank you all as well. So as part of my presentation, I'm going to have 2 launches for you today. Due to time constraints, this is just very overview of these 2 launches, but both sets of resources that I'll be talking about are now on our website, and those signed up to our member and stakeholder newsletters should be receiving links in your emails right about now. So first up is our vision for community energy in 2030. So those of you who attended the spring conference with Community Energy South, you will have had a sneak preview of some of this. Now, this vision might not seem groundbreaking to those of you who are already involved in community energy. I mean, who wouldn't want an energy system that's democratised, decentralised and decarbonised, and an energy transition that people are at the heart of? However, there are misconceptions around community energy, and we'll be using the vision to address this. So one I hear in some of the panels I sit on is that it's too small. In order to tackle climate change, we should just be focusing on large-scale, privately led projects. But as you can see here on this slide, with effective support mechanisms, this sector could grow between 12 and 20 times the size it is today by 2030, contribute over 5,000 megawatts, and save 2.5 million tons of CO2 emissions. Another thing I hear is that community energy benefits the few and not the many. Well, in 10 years' time, community energy could power 2.2 million homes and support 8,700 jobs. We want to see every community having the opportunity to engage in and benefit from energy. Another idea is it's too niche and will always be reliant on the goodwill of volunteers and has minimal wider benefit. Well, along with the broad social impact that community energy brings, it could also be supporting 8,700 jobs and adding £1.8 billion to the economy. I would like to highlight that this has been a very collaborative document with input from last year's summer conference, discussions with key practitioners, an online survey, and various other discussions over the past 12 months. This is a collective vision of where we could and should be with the right support mechanisms in 10 years. The transition can be seen as a journey, yet I think there's been very little discussion of direction of travel or what the UK would look like for people in a low carbon future. So this vision is our attempt to do this, to argue that the direction of travel is a fairer, more democratic and community-led future. I'll leave you to look through it at your own pace, but I just want to give a very quick overview of some of the main parts in it. So within the vision document, we do describe what we think community energy is, why people should care about it, and what makes it different. It breaks down the vision for community energy in 2030 into 6 core components: a whole systems approach, fair and democratic control, every community engaged, transparent policy and planning, leading system innovation, and a just transition. I appreciate I flew through those and my plan was to put them on this slide, but I ran out of time. And also some of these are more in grasp than others right now, but to me it seems common sense that this is something that the majority of people will want to sign up to. So looking at inboxes, have a look through the vision, let us know what you think of it. The vision isn't intended to be prescriptive, but to articulate the ambition of the sector. And it's the start of a programme of activity that CE will be working on to help us all achieve that vision. For now, we hope that the vision will help you engage with a wider audience, and we also have on our website a variety of images, templates for you to use on social media and your presentations on your websites and so on. So now, after that very, very brief overview, I'll move on to our second launch of the afternoon, the results of this year's State of the Sector survey. So on behalf of both Community Energy England and Community Energy Wales, I'd like to thank everyone who took the time to participate in the 4th annual State of the Sector survey earlier this year, to SEEN for producing the report, and to SP Energy Networks for sponsoring the document. Again, there's much more detail in the full report, and I'll be whizzing through some of these next slides. Look on our website for the infographics and all the background. So we found that 2019 was a year of climate activism, with the UK Parliament, Welsh Government, Northern Ireland Assembly and Scottish Government and many local authorities declaring climate emergencies. It was yet again a challenging year for the sector, with being negatively impacted by recent reductions in FITs, feed-in tariff support, unclear government strategy. But we found that community energy is playing an ever-increasing role in technological and social innovation. So the sector is developing new business models, exploring innovative new approaches, but we do need clear guidance and support across the UK. So we need to be supported to access new emerging opportunities to ensure the long-term growth and impact of the sector. So in terms of headline figures across England, Wales and Northern Ireland in 2019, we found 300 community energy organisations. Last year, about 15.5 megawatts of new electricity generation, which took the UK total community owned capacity to 264.9 megawatts. Just over 2 megawatts of heat capacity was developed, bringing again the UK total to just over 13 megawatts. Energy efficiency was delivered by 102 community organisations, and that means that 234 people were engaged by those organisations since our survey started, providing 28,000 energy efficiency improvements or upgrades. We found 39 organisations involved in storage, transport increased by 62% in 2019, with 47 communities actively developing electric vehicles, charging infrastructure and low carbon transport initiatives. So in terms of carbon emissions reduction, there was 65,200 tonnes, with further savings made through energy efficiency, low carbon transport and energy storage projects. And then there's a couple of other bits there around 4.6 of local economic benefits, which goes into more detail in the report, and just under £35 million of funding raised. So just moving on quickly, one thing we did find that although the development of projects is starting to move up the country more so, there is still quite a gap down the north and the east of the country. And this is also replicated in our graphs around heat and also some other innovation projects again. So that is going to be a continuing focus of some of our work, how to ensure that we continue to increase the development of projects and sharing of that learning regionally. We looked this year in a bit more detail around the wider value of community energy, looking around economic benefits, social benefits, environmental benefits, and that's really important to us in helping with our advocacy work and to help with the development of our social impact tool. So again, apologies, very quickly moving on. We found unsurprisingly, a whole host of barriers and support needs. The greatest barrier was related to feed-in tariff and organisational capacity, but all other things there around planning, high grid costs, subsidy changes. Again, this is all really valuable information for us to help with our advocacy and to look at where we need to be focusing support. As ever, community energy was found to be leading a number of innovative projects. What I would like to draw out from this slide is that importantly for community energy, it's not just the technological innovation focus. So there is that innovation around the business models and the partnerships, and that's going to be increasingly important, looking at everything in the whole like that. And I'm really looking forward to the next session where we'll be discussing some of that business model and partnership innovation through the local authority session. And looking ahead, there is still a pipeline of activity. So we found 89 projects planned for 2020. And actually, if you see it on the yellow bar there, the bit outlined with red, that's the number of FIT supported. So those projects that pre-registered for feed-in tariffs. It's actually quite a relatively small part of planned activity this year. So there'll be some really exciting examples coming through. And some of those will be speaking during Community Energy Fortnight. And we'll be looking at ways of sharing that learning more effectively with you all. And just quickly before I wrap up and hand over, I just wanted to pick up on some of the wider issues facing us and share some of the discussions we've been having at Community Energy England. I don't know about all of you, but I found the last 3 months quite difficult, adjusting to being isolated from friends and family due to COVID-19, seeing the truly devastating impact on people's lives, trying to figure out how we can keep pushing action on climate change in a sensitive way when we are facing a global emergency, and acknowledging my white privilege and how I should be taking much greater action in a personal capacity as a woman, as Chief Executive of Community Energy England. There's so many issues facing us right now for us to process that it can feel overwhelming, to put it mildly. In the UK, we have the 5th largest cumulative CO2 emissions in the world. Renewable energy obviously has a role to play, both in tackling climate change as an economically attractive way of helping to build resilience post-COVID-19. We must also ensure that this is done in a just way. Are we as a society prepared to accept the levels of fuel poverty shown in the blue graph on the bottom left? There are many debates as well at the moment of how to build back better, whether that's even the right term, an inevitable backlash, and rightly so, against a number of corporations using that term effectively as greenwash. Community energy is a powerful solution, but we can do better. 4% of the sector identifies as Black and minority ethnic, less than 2% as LGBTQ+, 3% neurodiverse and 2% disabled. Is there more we can be doing to reach more communities and to spread our impact further? Without a focus on correcting injustice, work on climate change addresses only symptoms and not root causes. Racial and environmental injustice is intrinsically linked. Now is the time for us to think big and to take action. We at CE don't have the answers, but we are working hard to have those hard conversations, and we'll do the hard work to see how we can do so much better. And we'd love to have those conversations with you and to work together as a sector and as a movement to ensure that what we do deliver is on the vision of putting people at the heart of the energy system and to ensure that we do develop a just, community-led and net zero energy system. If you would like to continue this conversation, please use the chat box. follow the links. Here's our contact details as well, and we'll be circulating these slides after the event. And finally, you might have seen us ramping up promotion for Community Energy Fortnight. Given what's been happening, we've had to drastically rethink how the fortnight runs and what it is and how it can still have impact and how you can get involved. Matthew from Thrive Renewables, our sponsors, will formally launch that later. But I just want to say thank you for all the enthusiasm for the sector, invite everyone to participate, to learn, to celebrate, to join in the conversation as we figure out how to harness our power and to build back better post-pandemic. Now, before I hand over to the next speaker, I believe that we have a poll to run, John, is that right? Yeah, so here we are. So if you could all just have a vote. So one, which of the following do you think is most important for us to be focusing on the next year? You can choose more than one. And also it'd be really helpful for us to know, how has COVID impacted on your organisation? And I'll just leave that open for another 20 seconds. Okay, so we're up to 80 people. Oh, it's still going up. 90. Okay, it looks to have slowed down. So if can we share those polling results? Great, so by far biggest, policy and lobbying, but community engagement still important, governance maybe less so. And in terms of impacts on COVID, medium and or short-term impacts, a lucky few has had little to no impacts. And unfortunately, a few it's had high or long-term impacts. So we'll be looking at those in a little bit more detail throughout the fortnight, and using the discussions from this as well to influence our final wrap-up conference too. Okay, so is that done? Great, okay. So what I'd like to do is stop sharing my screen, and I'd like to invite Tom to be the next speaker. Tom from Community Energy is our conference sponsor, and he'd like to talk to us about his Community Energy Fund. Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Emma. Thanks very much. Hi, everyone. I'm just going to quickly share my screen. There we go. Hopefully you can all see that. Yeah, hi, everyone. We're very happy and excited to be sponsoring today. Just reminiscing a little bit this morning about the first Community Energy Conference that sort of I was involved in, which was back in 2013 at the Royal Geographical Society. I think having a quick flick through the attendees on today's conference, I can see a lot of familiar names there and a lot of people who are involved in that. And it's great to see so many people still working hard and striving towards some fairly ambitious goals in community energy. So that was just on a personal note. What I've got to talk to you about today is a little bit about who Community Energy are and what it is we do. And then, as Emma mentioned, a bit about the Community Power Tariff, which is a product that Co-op Energy, the domestic supplier, has, and at the back of that, the Community Power Fund and what that is and how that works. So a little bit about what we do. We are a joint venture between the Mid-Counties Cooperative, who own the Co-op Energy Supply label, the brand, and Octopus Energy, who are a domestic and commercial retail business supplier. I think many of you I've had the chance to meet over the past sort of 6 or 7 months in how long our business has been going for. We're still relatively new, and I'm going to dangerously ad lib here a little bit on the back of Emma's presentation. And I think one of the things that struck me about the different themes that were running common in the majority of groups that I've spoken to is this piece about membership and engagement and what it means to be a member of a community energy group. And I think almost every single group that I've had the chance to meet with or Zoom conference with has spoken about this need to diversify their membership a little bit, and they're very aware of the issues around that, and particularly in the current environment, how important that is. So I think that's an extremely important point to remember, is that the new technology and the new business models and the new ways of doing things, coping in a post-subsidy world, is all extremely important. But I think every group has different ambitions and different targets, but that one theme of engaging with membership, better engaging with communities, and looking at a more varied membership base is extremely important. So it was really good to hear that from Emma, and something I know we're going to be quite heavily focused on over the coming months. So anyway, we have two core business streams, and those form sort of the majority of what we do, and our principal reason for being. One of those is to secure power purchase agreements with community renewable generators. So we negotiate those contracts with a generator to buy their electricity, which links into the second core stream, which is selling that electricity to domestic customers via one of our parent companies, which at the moment we've created the Community Power Tariff, which is a product launched on the Co-op Energy label. And the Community Power Tariff is a 100% renewable tariff, and it's backed entirely by generation from community energy projects. So it's not a REGO exercise. It's not just going out and buying a load of REGOs from anonymous generators all across the country. It is a contract-backed and relationship-backed tariff with those generators. A little bit of the additionality that tariff provides is in the form of our Community Power Fund. So for every customer that switches to that tariff, we've negotiated to put in a donation into a fund, which is there to support community energy groups in either bolstering existing initiatives or trying new initiatives or new plans that they have. The first round of that, we've just closed applications for. We've had some very good applications in, and we will be giving out 3 pots of £2,500, which is a relatively modest amount, but obviously the more people that switch to the Community Power Tariff, the bigger that pot and the bigger the fund can become. So the first recipients of that fund will be announced at the second conference in a couple of weeks' time, which again, obviously the online conference in a fortnight's time. But we will be repeating the fund, which will be distributed at the end of this year. At the moment, that is set at another 3 pots of £2,500. But obviously, as I said before, the more people that switch to it, the more people, the bigger that fund can be. So that's the main core part of our business, and we would invite anyone who wants to become wants to bid into that fund and submit proposals to it to contact Ryan, who works with us. His contact details are on the next slide. On top of that, some of the things that we are also working on, which I'm hoping will encourage a few people to sort of reach out to us or come to us with ideas that they might have, is looking at sort of different innovations in the market. One of these, probably the best example at the moment, is Ripple Energy, who we've been working with very closely or Co-op Energy we've been working closely with for a couple of years, and we've sort of taken that on since we started, which is an extremely exciting prospect. It's a way for domestic energy consumers to better engage with renewable energy, not just renewable energy, but community-owned energy. Seeing the return on their investment on their domestic energy bill. It is set up as a cooperative. It does have a community benefit, and it is new build generation coming onto the grid. So it's an extremely exciting project, and a little plug that is open now. If anyone wants to go and have a look at that, you can switch to Co-op Energy on that and support new build generation. So we're extremely pleased about that. And then some of the other things that we hope to be announcing within the next few weeks and months. I've just listed 3 things here to give you an idea, to sort of, as I say, encourage people to come and engage with us, come and speak to us if you have any ideas, if there's anything that you think that we can support with. And that can be anything from, I don't want to say boring, but sort of the day-to-day nitty-gritty administrative and billing burdens of being involved in a community energy group. And there may be potential things that we can do to support there, and sort of working with energy suppliers and who have billing engines, there may be something that we can help with. All the way to new finance models and new ways of bringing about generation onto the grid, whether it's something similar to Ripple, where it's domestic customers investing and seeing that engagement on their energy bill, or different ways of launching share offers, or anything along those lines. It's something that we are actively working on with a number of parties, and we're very keen to push forward. And then working with both of our parent companies to look at new potential domestic supply offerings. I think we all view the community power tariff as a starter, as a first step on this road, and it's the first of its kind in the UK, in that it's 100% backed with community energy projects. But there's some really exciting, innovative stuff that we can add on to that or change, and that can develop over time. And if people have ideas, we're speaking to different groups across the countries who all want to try new potential products. You know, we'd really like to speak to you. So I've kind of gone through this, but so this is just a little bit of information about the community power tariff and the fund. The key thing on that slide is the contact email at the bottom. So if you do have anything that you are quite interested in discussing with us, whether it's a business model that you might just be formulating, or it's something that you're a little bit along the lines with, then you know, we'd be really interested to see if we can support. So I think that's it for me. Really looking forward to hearing the different speakers and the rest of the day. And if you do have any questions or anything, then please reach out. Thanks very much.
Great, thank you very much, Tom. And just to flag in the chat, Grant has included a link to Community Energy Well statements on Black Lives Matters, if any of you would like to click and have a look at that. And just a reminder before I introduce Dirk, that please do use the Q&A function and vote on your most popular questions as well. And welcome, Dirk. For those of you who have been to our conferences before, Dirk did speak at one maybe 3 or 4 years ago now. Really looking forward to what you've got to say. So I'll leave you to introduce yourself.
Okay. You can see my presentation now?
Yes, we can, yeah.
Full screen normally, yep. Good afternoon. I'm sorry we can't meet physically. I'm Dirk Vansintjan. I'm the president of the European Federation, and we call it now, of Citizen Energy Cooperatives. We are living in strange times. The day after the lockdown in Belgium, 2 crates of beer without bottles arrived at our watermill, where my cooperative started near the city of Leuven. Actually, the students in Leuven, they held a Corona drinking festivity, I think. Yeah. So what is the Federation? What is the European Federation? We represent about 1,500 of the 3,400 energy cooperatives there are around in Europe. And these cooperatives, they are owned by about more than 1 million citizens of Europe.
And sorry, I don't want to intrude the flow too much, but we can see the presenter version, so we can only see a little bit of the screen. So I don't know if you can go into full screen, just because I think there's a bit more detail on future slides.
Do I do this?
it may work better if you stop sharing your screen and then go to presenter mode and then share your screen again.
Stop sharing. Sorry about
I think
this.
John's advice was stop sharing your screen momentarily and then put your presentation into full screen mode and then click on sharing screen.
Sorry.
Don't worry.
That's it?
That's better.
Yeah, okay. That's not perfect yet, I think. Yeah. You see. Sorry. Okay. So where are these cooperatives situated? You see on our website, you can find a map where the initiatives can put themselves on the map. Not all of them did, luckily, otherwise you wouldn't see the map anymore. But you can see that it's more something of Northwestern Europe than of the south of Europe. And in the east, the former communist countries, we're absent, let's say. We have federations that are a member. I won't go in. So one of them is Community Energy England. Of course, they represent more cooperatives, like in the Netherlands now, Energizing, it's the new umbrella organization, and they represent about 600 initiatives already. In other countries like Denmark, where there are more than 1,000 initiatives, there is no federation yet. So there, for these countries, we have individual members. But often also we have members of Community Energy England that are a direct member of the federation as well, because they engage or they participated in European projects together with the federation. So there are almost every month we have new members joining. Recently from Greece and Luxembourg, and we also have some associate members, like energy agencies like Energy from Scotland, or consulting agencies. Yeah. So that's our team. This guy is from Wales. He's an intern, and he's very, very active on the internet, on the social media. So, but you will have the presentation, I suppose. So if you have questions to our team, you have their contact details. So the board, so from UK, we have Energy for All, where Mark Luntley, who's also present here, is one of the board members of the federation. So we meet once in a month, let's say. We collaborate, let's say, in the Brussels bubble, because our main activity, one of our main activities is presence at the European Commission, European Parliament. Unfortunately, you are left out of this now. But what's very important is this Community Power Coalition, where we team up with environmental organizations, but also other cooperative sectors like Housing Europe, social housing, but also with networks of cities, so like ICLE, Climate Alliance, and Energy Cities. And so also for us, this is very important, I think, for every cooperative, that we have a good collaboration with the local authorities. We became a new sector in the umbrella organization of the International Cooperative Alliance, the European branch, Cooperatives Europe. So I'm also board member of Cooperatives Europe, where we come into contact with the other sectors. We were part of the Coalition for Energy Savings, Bridge, and the Small is Beautiful campaign. So what let's say across the channel, but I think it's also still important for you, is that at the European level, we now have different directives. where we got a definition for what we do. And in the Electricity Directive, we are called citizen energy communities. In the Renewable Energy Directive, we're called renewable energy communities. There's a big overlap, but unfortunately the definitions are not identical, because different people worked on it in the Parliament, in the Commission, and in the member states. But it's when you read it, you will recognize a lot of what cooperatives do. That's in fact what we try to get into all these texts, that we had as much of the cooperative principles included in the definitions. And I think we succeeded for more than 90%. So now on the European level, it's all about Green New Deal. Of course, COVID-19 well, diverted a lot of attention, but now it's up to us to see that with all the money that will be put in place to revive the economy and the whole society, that the attention does not go away from what really matters, and that's the energy transition to energy democracy as far as we are concerned. So I also wrote in the Euractiv. It's a press website, which is quite important in Brussels and across Europe. I wrote an article about that a resilient EU economy must be built on strong local communities. You will find it in the presentation. You can read it. So actually, this what happens now, and also the climate crisis, it's the energy transition will be crucial if it strengthens the local communities. That's the key message we gave. So the Federation engages in a lot of projects funded by Europe. We've had quite a lot of UK partners on board as well. So for instance, this is an Interreg Northwestern Europe project where there are partners from Wales involved, where we teamed up, a bit strange, with a rather conservative farmers organization in Flanders. And the idea is to set up energy cooperatives, which are called ECHOs here, of farmers and their neighbors in the village. So we have a whole bunch of other in research and innovation projects, where the idea is that we participate often together with members. So the result must be either services or software, hardware, things our members can use. And there are some new ones now. For instance, the RESCoop virtual power plant project. This is very interesting, and a lot of our members are interested. So you can follow us on social media, on our website. We're also part of the Clean Energy for EU Island Secretariat, where we focus on the energy transition on physical islands. So we used to run across Europe. Last year we were present, active as speaker or panelists in more than 100 events. Most of them close to our members. So these photographs now are quite strange. People touching each other and groups not wearing masks, but that's how it was before COVID-19. And sometimes we are very far away. So as part of Cooperatives Europe, I also participated in an ICA conference in Kigali in Rwanda. I was for the first time in Africa. And it was on development. It's very interesting talks there with people from all over the world. So we are very, we do a very intense advocacy. And this is an invitation. Keep your agenda free. We will have a 3-day conference in Copenhagen next year in person. I'm convinced it will be in person. Copenhagen, that's where this very, very nice offshore wind farm is just outside of the harbor of Copenhagen, and half of these turbines are owned by the local cooperative Middelgrunden, who is also a board member of our federation. Well, this was very fast what I had to say in the time I got. Okay.
Thank you. That was really, really interesting. And we will send around the slides so you can all see them a little bit better. And I do recommend you have a read through the blog that Dirk mentioned. It was really interesting. And just to say, I echo Chris Rowland in the chat that RESCoops is important, more important to us now than ever, and will be into the future. And CU will obviously be continuing its support. And we've actually already started speaking to RESCoop about how we can link in to make the most impact as possible for COP next year. So watch this space, and if people are interested in learning more about RESCoop, then I'm sure that we can arrange a follow-up webinar so that Dirk and his colleagues can go into some of this in a little bit more detail. I hope I'm not putting words in your mouth there, Dirk. I'm promising something.
No problem.
Great, okay. Tom, if you want to come back online now as well, and I'll go through the questions. For those of you who aren't sure how to vote on questions, although I might be able to get through them all because there aren't many, just click on the thumbs up underneath. So at the moment, the most popular question is probably one for me, and then I will hand over the others to the other panelists, is how much does the UK government energy policy align with the community energy vision? I would say not enough. There's still a lot of work we have to do. We've come a long way in the last couple of years in terms of acknowledgement and recognition of community energy and a lot of warm words. But I think there's a lot more action. Duncan has been, our policy manager's been doing a lot to try and feed into the upcoming energy white paper. There's still a huge focus on kind of big technological innovation, not much about people. You've seen in the contracts of difference consultation recently, there's a lot of stuff around community engagement, but not taking that a bit more proactively forward. So I think there's some hope there, but there's a heck of a lot more to do. And I think it's not just about engaging at national level. We're going to have to influence from regional and local policy as well. Don't know if either of you two have anything to add on that before I move on to the other questions. No, okay. Dirk, one for you then. Do you think that the postponement of COP is actually an opportunity or a year wasted to reach net zero?
Well, I think it's a pity there is no COP. Of course, we don't waste a lot of energy going there, but it was close this time for us. We are also, as a federation, accredited now by the United Nations to as a party that can have some that can enter the building and can influence and go to meetings. So we were prepared to do this. Of course we would reserve some place for people from the UK. When it was in Madrid instead of Chile, our Spanish members went to the COP, previous one. So yeah, I've been to several already, to Paris, in Poland, Katowice. I also participated. It's a big event, but yeah, it's good to let our voice, that the people hear our voice. All across the world, people are looking at our model, at our examples. There are initiatives all across the globe, and as we think that the energy transition will only succeed if if citizens can get ownership of it, then that's not only for the UK, not only for Belgium or Europe. It's the same in the whole world, I think. So it's important for us to be there.
Great, thank you. Tom, I know you've answered this one, but for those of you like me who struggle sometimes to keep up with the chat and the Q&A and the discussion, do you want to just give your view? There's been a few questions around Power for People and the local electricity bill. Are you able to just briefly explain what it is to people and what you've responded to Sydney on the Q&A?
Yeah, I'm probably not best placed to explain the local electricity bill because it's not something I mean, I've read through it, but I've not engaged with the people who put it together or sort of had that discussion with them. But I will say local supply and the generators being able to sell their electricity locally is probably one of the things that I've had more debates and discussions over than anything else in relation to renewable or community energy. And I absolutely understand why local community groups might be interested in doing that. I guess the points that I put in the chat is probably two things that concern me a little bit about it. And the stance I take on this, as with most things, is I have fairly strong opinions on this, but they're loosely held. So I'm happy to discuss this further with anyone and have that debate again. But one is that electricity supply is extremely difficult. It's a very heavily regulated industry, and rightly so. It's an industry where we've seen, I think, over 20 electricity suppliers leave the market in the last 18 months or so. It is a tough thing to make work, and I think I would need to understand a little bit better how the local electricity bill would work. But the idea of having new energy suppliers coming up based on local generation, I think I understand the part it would play in the local economy piece, but it is an extremely challenging industry to operate in. So I think that's one concern. The second is what happens if I want to support community energy, and I like the idea of community energy, but I don't happen to live near a community energy project. If I live in a city centre, you know, or I'm 100 miles away from a project and I can't buy that electricity, how does that affect me? I think while the benefits from local generation and the community benefit or whatever it is coming from those projects, you know, it needs to benefit the community in which it's operating. I think we can't get away from the fact that we operate in a national framework, and I think that's a strength. I think the idea of community energy groups all across the country coming together and looking at innovative ways to sell their power and better engaging with customers is quite an exciting prospect. And it would worry me if it was only focused on people who happen to live near a project. So I think those are two concerns I have about it. But as I say, I'm more than happy to discuss those further.
And any community members of Community Energy England who is interested in discussing it further, there's actually a chat on our practitioner Lumio network about that at the moment, in terms of what CE's role should be. And we back the concept, but we agree that more detail is needed to take it forward. So the next most popular one, again, is one for you, Dirk. How do UK community energy groups fit into the EU directive definitions for energy communities, either citizen or renewable? And then I can pick up about the UK government. So have you really thought about, in terms of because obviously in the UK, the terminology we use is slightly different and some of the activities are slightly different. I know that I've spoken to Josh in the past about it, but it's not something I've dug into enough. So
yeah, yesterday there was we have a working group on the transposition of the new directives. And if I remember well, what was said is that it is unclear whether the new directives will be transposed or used in the UK or not. Certainly the administrations of the UK, they have been involved in writing these directives, so they know all about it. But it is, I think it would be very good if these definitions were used anyway, because I think it gives us, once you have a definition in legislation, and what especially what is very interesting, if it is transposed, is that there must be a energy communities must be given a level playing field, and all obstacles should be taken away. And what's more, there should be an enabling framework to foster the energy communities, the renewable energy communities. So one of the examples that we often give is how it is done in Scotland. You're easily a community energy project there, but maybe too easy. But when member states ask for how it can be done, we sometimes refer to Scotland. So we think there's a lot of opportunities in these that we got now, these definitions, and I think if it's not something like this, not in your legislation, you should lobby for it, I think, to have it. Is there an answer? Yeah.
We'll share. RESCoop did a brilliant overview of what it all means, so we'll make sure we share that. We are discussing a little bit with government, but I think it's mentioned in the chat, again, echoing what Dirk just said about Scottish Government's leadership around this. So I think there is a real opportunity there around COP as well. Right, we've got 1 minute until the break, and then I realised that we've got quite a packed agenda. So in relation to the question about how to sign up to RESCoop, it's on the website. We will send a link as well, so you can find out more and think about membership. And then Debbie and Mike, yeah, I think that's something we definitely need to talk more about in terms of will COVID provide a platform for radically rethinking the way we live. I think yes, it should, and you know, we need to, as I said, think big and work together. So just like to thank very much Tom and Dirk. I hope you can stick around and feed into the rest of the day. Really appreciate your insights. We'll be sharing their presentations, and any questions or chat that hasn't been picked up, we will try and pick up afterwards. So we now have a 5-minute break. So go grab a coffee, stretch your legs, and then we will be reconvening at 2 o'clock. Helen Seagrave from Electricity North West and on our board will be taking over chair to talk about climate emergencies, building fruitful relationships between local authorities and communities. So see you in 5. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Is it time to get started? Is everyone back from their tea break? Hopefully I'm sharing my screen correctly. If I'm not, could somebody please let me know? My name's
Sharing
Helen.
is slide, but it's not quite full screen.
Thank you. I don't actually know how to do that because it doesn't seem to be working.
I think we can see enough for now.
And I can't even get rid of the format background function for some reason. Doesn't. Anyway, thank you very much for accepting slightly shoddy slide sharing. My name's Helen Seagrave. I'm the Community Energy Manager of Electricity North West, and I'm on the board of Community Energy England. Thank you for the opportunity to sponsor today's conference and to be a supporting sponsor and to take part today. We're the DNO for the Northwest of England, and since 2017 I've been developing and delivering our strategy for supporting the community and local energy sector in our region. The main aim of our strategy is to increase our engagement with groups across our area so we can improve our understanding of the issues and barriers that they face and develop our support accordingly. This slide gives an overview of our strategy and also the state of the sector in our region. This data comes from our regional state of the sector report, which we've published alongside the national one today and prepared in partnership with Community Energy England and Scene Consulting. Through our engagement work, we've developed our understanding, and I have some thoughts on why working with local authorities, which is the focus of this next session, could potentially have some real benefits for community energy sector and also for the local areas where they're based. One of the ways I think is could potentially be important and is going to be the focus for the first speaker is through long-term PPAs. We know that with the decline of the feed-in tariffs, that long-term contracts are an important part of making community energy business models work and reducing the risk that they face. Local authorities can also help with underwriting community energy, as Oldham Council in our area did for older community power a few years ago. And another way in my local authority area, Salford, are supporting our local community energy group by encouraging schools to work with them, and Greater Manchester Community Renewables have so far installed 9 solar schemes across schools around where I live. So I was going to introduce the housekeeping for the session, but I think everybody's got the hang of the Q&A function and asking questions. We've got half an hour for questions and answers at the end, so I will do what Emma did and focus on the ones that are most popular, so don't forget to vote. But before I go any further, I will introduce our first speakers, who are Syed Ahmed from Community Energy London and Liz Ainslie from Islington Council, who are going to talk about the work that they've done together. Right, is somebody, hello everybody. Do you have slides? Is somebody in charge of sharing them?
I do indeed. I think I have to share my screen.
Yes, you should have power now.
I should hopefully be able to do that shortly. Okay, are we good there, Helen? You can see that, okay, and hopefully...
Yes, that's working fine, well done.
Thank you. Hopefully my colleague Liz is somewhere in the ether as well. Oh, there you are, Liz.
Hello.
Well done. So I should just introduce myself, and we're doing a double hander on this. So thank you to Emma and Community Energy England for inviting Liz and myself to come and talk about a particular project that we were looking to take forward in London. And that was very much within the theme of this particular session, not surprisingly, which is trying to develop fruitful relationships between community energy groups and local authorities. From my perspective, the vast proportion of community energy projects that not only are in place, but will be in place in the future, the role of the local authority from a number of aspects, from everything to do with planning, technical support, councillor support, will all depend on the local authority being made aware of the project and also being supportive of the project. So it's been very key to us to develop those relationships. So we've got around about 6 or 7 slides, and we'll rattle through them. But first of all, I just wanted to introduce Community Energy London to you. If I can get the slides to move, maybe that way. Oops, hold on. Here we go. Thank you. Just for those who might not be aware of the organisation, so CEL formed in 2017, originally as an informal network of people and organisations who were keen on seeing the development of community energy. We're now formally established as a BENCOM. We hold monthly meetings in City Hall. We've developed a good relationship with colleagues in the Greater London Authority, and so it's very helpful to have access to a meeting room on a monthly basis and the use of the GLA's resources for presentations and so on. And we utilise these meetings such that we can build capacity amongst members, share experiences and resources, and work through some of the challenges that they may have as they're developing projects. One of the key reasons Community Energy London came together was, you may remember there was something the government had called the Urban Community Energy Fund. That was withdrawn by government in 2016, and we saw that as a major blow for what was already a challenging environment in London for developing projects. And so the mayor had recently taken his roles, Mayor Sadiq Khan, and we were talking to officers there about replacing the ability for funding, for feasibility funding for projects from an Urban Community Energy Fund at the national level to a London Community Energy Fund. And so we had a kind of tentative kind of step-by-step relationship with the GLA. And I think as more projects have come forward and gone over the line and shown some really good kind of relationships with local communities in terms of making sure people understand about cleaner energy, we've actually managed to increase the feasibility support level from £400,000 to the last tranche of funding brought the total sum of money to £500,000 by January of this year. And we now have close to 50 projects across the capitals and that they range from a number of technologies from PV, solar PV, energy efficiency, to even small-scale anaerobic digestion, novel energy efficiency kind of projects, and also a key area in London, especially at the moment, providing advice to residents on energy bill saving and fuel poverty alleviation. We've set this out in detail in our annual report, which was published at the end of last year. When the slides have been provided, there's a link there, but if you go to communityenergy.london, you'll be able to see it there. And so again, this element of working with local authorities, establishing this fruitful relationship, is something that's been key to us, and building upon that which we've done with the GLA. And as new projects have come forward, principally through the London Community Energy Fund, but also through other support mechanisms that have been available in the capital, we've seen a resurgence in community energy action in London. And we can see that recently with a number of projects that are awarded under the Community Energy England Awards back towards the tail end of last year. We wanted to make sure that we could collaborate more with local authorities to build upon that success we've had. And so one of the key routes last year was something that was referred to earlier on in the conference, and that's the climate emergency declarations. We now have, London has 33 boroughs, and we now have 28 London boroughs that have signed climate energy declarations. And a key component of many of the working groups in councils around how they're going to realise these declarations is how are they going to get local residents, local community groups and local businesses to get involved in developing and supporting carbon reduction projects in their area. And we saw this as a clear opportunity to better harness that ability for community energy groups to work with local authorities. Last year, we ran a series of workshops under the theme Community Energy in a Climate Emergency. And we worked with 10 London boroughs. And that was particularly good. We found, without exception, a fantastic kind of interest from borough officers to work with community energy groups to help shape the way in which their climate emergency plan was delivered, and also bring forward projects. Because in the age of austerity, the number of officers in local authorities has diminished. They need resources, they need connections into their local community to help both conceive projects and deliver them. And community energy groups are in a good place to do that. There's a particular policy in the capital around something called carbon offset funds. And this is an area where new development in London, residential development, have to be zero carbon. That's very challenging at the present time. And the developers are pressed to deliver as much carbon saving as possible. And the remainder of carbon emissions that they cannot reduce down to zero, they have to pay £60 a tonne to the borough. That money needs to be ring fenced and spent by the borough in other carbon reduction projects. And we've been in a conversation with boroughs about earmarking an amount of that money into specific community energy funds. And we've been successful. London boroughs of Camden, Greenwich and Islington, which Liz will be talking about shortly, have all had community energy funds in place. Camden and Islington for several years. Greenwich introduced theirs in autumn 2019. As climate emergency plans have been emerging, we've been analysing those and speaking to councils in advance of the production of these plans to encourage them to look to see where they can use community energy. And we've seen recent plans by the London boroughs of Haringey and Hounslow introduce funds within their climate emergency plans. We're also seeing other supportive measures for community energy in the boroughs of Wandsworth, Richmond upon Thames and Sutton. So there has been a delay in some of the plans, obviously due to officers being redeployed elsewhere in the borough because of COVID. But now some of the work is restarting again, and we're redoubling our efforts with our member groups to liaise with their borough to talk about the opportunities for community energy funds. Just one thing before I pass to Liz is one of the things that when we go to talk about to officers and councillors about why they should even bother establishing a community energy fund, well, it's become, as I've mentioned, more relevant in terms of their climate emergency plans, and it's, you know, increasing the number of projects in their area. Also, you know, encouraging individuals and local groups into carbon reduction action, either through community projects or individually as well. Also, time and time again, community energy is at the forefront of local decentralised energy kind of action, and they're delivering innovative projects, and that's clearly something that boroughs would like to champion, especially councillors, and also that allows for these groups to tap into new sources of money from the government. Also, clearly, we'll be helping the local authority achieve their very ambitious climate targets. And a really important thing, of course, is many of these projects are only part funded in terms of any capital that the local authority can provide, and therefore they look to secure additional funding by reaching out to their local community through crowd share offers. And we've seen in excess of £1 million go to projects through initiatives that the community energy groups in the capital have taken forward over the last 18 months. And I think we'll probably double that in terms of the total number of schemes that have gone through the London Community Energy Fund. Importantly as well, many community energy groups make a priority about working with local businesses and also encouraging training and educational opportunities to people in their borough, from everything from younger people to other people who've been out of work. So we've seen that time and time again with projects. So community energy can reach into really areas where the borough really struggles and provide a resource to local authorities in developing their projects. I will be quiet for a second now. Liz, if you unmute yourself, you can talk about your fund.
Thanks very much, Syed. I'm Liz Ainslie from Islington Council. I sit in the energy team. We're quite fortunate to have a large energy team. And I look after the Community Energy Fund for the council. It was established in 2016 prior to my joining the council. The Environment and Regeneration Scrutiny Committee had heard from a number of organisations in the borough, and a number of councillors were keen to help organisations, small community groups, charities, community interest organisations to help to put energy saving measures into local community centres, schools, churches, etc., and also to have renewable energy grow in the borough. So our fund really was set up to support community-led initiatives, not from the top down, but from the bottom up, and to also benefit local residents, particularly the fuel poor. Islington is quite a funny borough in that we have a huge amount of wealth, but we also have a huge amount of fuel poverty in the borough as well. But also the projects we want them to reduce carbon emissions in the borough and move to renewable energy, cleaner energy. We require the projects to focus on some of them, that they don't have to tick all the boxes, obviously, but we need them to focus on at least 2 of the areas in order to be successful. We have had 4 rounds of funding to date and have given away £360,000 of the Section 106 carbon offset money that Syed referred to. Again, Islington is very fortunate in that we've had a lot of building work and a lot of community carbon offset fund that we were able to set up a community energy fund as well as do other projects with it. So that's quite unique. And we have another 2 rounds that we're planning on going forward with. Unfortunately, round 5 was a bit delayed. It's been put on hold due to COVID-19, but we're hoping to start it up again soon now that a lot of the lockdown restrictions are easing. Our fund covers capital costs mostly, but we also will cover some core costs. We'll cover feasibility studies, consulting fees, project management fees. Some grants only cover capital costs, so purchasing of equipment, but we want to make sure that community groups have, if they need to get a project manager in or a consultant in to actually help them with a complicated project, we don't want them to be disadvantaged because they couldn't get the funding. We've also revised and tweaked our fund over the last 4 rounds as we come up against various questions. There's always, no matter how well you plan and how much you have a how-to guide of how to do things, there's always a question you haven't thought of. So, for example, we've had groups come back and say, can we apply in a new round? And we hadn't thought about that. So we decided that, well, if you have a project that we think is worthy, you should be treated exactly as anybody else in the borough, whether or not you've had funding before. Next slide, please. Thank you. So like I said, we used money from our carbon offset fund to support the projects. And if you are setting up a community energy fund, you'll need to speak to your Section 106 team to find out what you can do with your carbon offset money, how much money you have in the pot, and how much you would be allowed to use for the community energy fund. Some councils have more, some councils have less. Some have earmarked their carbon offset funds for particular things, such as putting solar on all schools or things like that. So just find out what is the possibility. If you're able to go ahead, it might sit in a different team. You might have an energy team, it might sit in your finance team, your environment team, or planning team. So you need to decide where best your your community energy fund would sit within the authority. And depending on how much carbon offset funding you have, that might impact how much officer time is required. So I work on the Community Energy Fund, but that is not my whole role. And we have quite a large fund. Sometimes various points of the year, all I'm doing is Community Energy Fund for days and days and days. And then sometimes between rounds, I'm just doing housekeeping with different projects, checking up on them, making sure everything's okay, signing things off, that sort of thing. So if you have more funding, you'll need more officer time. If you have less funding, it won't require a full-time officer role. but you always should have a dedicated officer looking after this, because you're obviously dealing with carbon offset funds that have to be accounted for. You have to make sure that you're spending them wisely, and you have to make sure that you're getting approval at all the right levels that the project can go ahead. Next, please, Syed. So we wrote this how-to guide about what to think about when you're setting up a community energy fund, because we've sort of had lots of learning over the last 4 years about what works, what doesn't, what we forgot about, what we should have thought about. So when you sit down, these are some of the questions you should ask yourselves. So who do you want to benefit from the fund? Do you have a specific area? Do you want schools? Do you want community groups, charities? We basically have, if you are a charitable organization, if you have a charity number, if you're a faith group, if you're a community interest group, you're welcome to apply. We have something called an Energizing Small Business Fund that is a separate carbon offset funding for small businesses, so they can still take advantage of putting renewable and low energy technologies into their business, but that's completely separate from the Community Energy Fund. You need to think about how much money you would like to allocate to each application. So do you have a maximum? We had started off with £15,000 per application was the maximum. But then we decided that actually there's a lot of things that you could do that are really interesting. Ground source heat pumps, air source heat pumps, all kinds of solar and battery storage, but it's going to be more than £15,000. So we've increased the threshold to £30,000 per project application. You might think, actually, we'd like to limit it to £5,000 per application and have more projects out there rather than a few large projects. Think about what the funding can be spent on, what it can pay for, what you won't want it to pay for. How many application rounds will you have? Will you just do a couple of big application rounds? Will you scatter it throughout the year? Will you have a monthly intake for applications? That sort of thing. How will you notify the applicants? How will you go through the applications, review them, notify the applicants, and go ahead with the applications? You need to think about how you promote the fund, and then how you look after the projects themselves. So do the projects have to save a certain amount of carbon? Do they have to benefit the community, etc.? What are your sort of criteria for the different projects? And then how can you measure those when you check into the projects each time that you go back to them? I think that's probably it, Syed.
Yeah, I think that's right. So working with Liz, we decided to bring all these points in with more detail into a paper which we've launched today. It's published on the Community Energy London website. There's a link there. It's a bit unwieldy, but if you just Google communityenergy.london, it's on the news section of the website. I mean, clearly London has this benefit of offset funds, but a number of local authorities outside of the capital also have set zero carbon targets, and increasing numbers of local authorities are looking to do this. And this is also a hot topic, as many of you would have responded to the Future Homes consultation, and that has set a pathway for homes which are lower carbon. I hesitate to say zero carbon, but lower carbon by 2025. And you'll remember, I think, at one of the earlier Community Energy England briefings, there was a question in that consultation about whether or not local authorities could set their own targets. And my understanding is the vast majority of respondents very vociferously said local authorities should be able to set their own targets. And with setting their targets, there's clearly an opportunity to look at carbon offset funds as well. Just to say one thing, the carbon offset policy in London, as of this year, when the new London plan is finally published by the Mayor, the finalised version, will extend the carbon offset policy from residential applications to all applications, and will also include the offset price from £60 a tonne to £92.50 a tonne. So therefore, London local authorities will be able to access, hopefully, more funding, which will work well in terms of them looking to have projects to reduce carbon and meet their climate emergency targets, but also clearly as well harness the power of community energy groups in their area to bring forward a plethora of different schemes. I think we'll stop there, Helen.
Thank you very much.
Stop sharing.
That was great, and I wasn't aware of the carbon offset fund before, and it sounds like a fabulous resource that's been put to great use. And there's been lots of questions about how other parts of the country can do it. So your last slide helped with answering that and sharing the link to the guidance. So thank you very much for that. I can introduce our next speaker now, who is Alistair Macpherson from Plymouth City Council, who can talk about another way that local authorities can work in partnership with community energy groups. So are you there, Alistair?
I am. Can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Good.
Are you sharing your screen?
I'm going to try and share my screen.
Could do with making the slides bigger if you can.
Alistair, if you want to try and not share your desktop, but share one of the windows that would be the PowerPoint, you might need to stop sharing screen and then share screen again.
Yep.
Thank you.
Bear with me. Any better, everyone?
Yes, much better. Thank you.
Great. All right. Thank you, Helen. My name's Alistair Macpherson. I here today from Plymouth City Council to talk about fruitful relationships with local authorities. I've worked in local government. I'm going to say it out loud, but you know, because it's
Alistair, you're a bit breaking up. Could maybe you turn your video off so we to help your bandwidth?
About relationship. Yeah.
We didn't really catch the first bit. See if that works. Thank you.
Any better?
Yes, it seems to be.
Okay, so just introductions. Yeah, cool. Alistair Macpherson. I work for Plymouth City Council, Chief Executive for Plymouth Energy Community, which is, I think, an example of fruitful relationship between local government and community energy. Talking today not really about that relationship, but how we're kind of expanding that into thinking with an organisation called Yelm Community Energy that I'm a director on, and Devon Energy CIC, which is a Devon-wide umbrella organisation. And specifically about our learning in the last kind of year or so about the role power purchase agreements can help in terms of stimulating a new generation. So I'm just going to move slides, and then you just tell me if the slides move.
It hasn't done yet. Oh yes, now it has. Thank you.
Cool. All right. So the context. Massive explosion of local government organisations stepping up and declaring an emergency. These figures are a little bit out of date probably now, but 65% of councils now declare climate emergency, with 165 of those pledged to be carbon neutral by 2030. Most of them don't really know what they've said when they've done that. To be fair, there's a definitely honesty, and I think probably if you ask them, they'd admit that. But they recognise that they've got a kind of moral obligation to take leadership in this space, even if they haven't got all the answers to do that. So yeah, hats off to those politicians that have been brave enough to make those kind of declarations, and we should be kind of applauding them for it, really. A lot of them are now nervous about how they kind of perform against those standards, and that's driving some increased demand and interest in corporate PPAs in the way that local government, but also other public bodies that are making similar directions, can buy green power. That alongside is we need some new models for community energy, and that kind of background everyone in the room will be well rehearsed on. So the essay question I wanted to run through with you was, how can public bodies procure energy in a manner that supports community energy? That's kind of just what I want to reflect on and share our learning from the last kind of 6 months so of work that we've been doing that. And we've had a couple of project opportunities of which to test that question. One is one funded by Europe called Reg Energy, where we have a partnership with Yelm Community Energy and Creacum Solar Farm, looking at about how that community group could supply energy into public bodies within the city. And also we're in the process where we have established an umbrella organisation called Devon Energy Collective, Devon Energy CIC, with seed funding from Devon County Council, which looks to be kind of an umbrella organisation that can help broker corporate PPAs on behalf of smaller community energy groups, and it's those two particular case studies that are kind of my learning today is kind of shared from. So what's Plymouth City Council's logo is loud and proud on this template of this PowerPoint. Actually, there's a lot of other thinking in the background. So specifically, the Reg Energy and Yelm Community Energy kind of project is around, how we've been talking to Yelm Community Energy and Creacum Solar for about a year and a half about getting the Interreg money into support and exploration about how different forms of PPA could help enable this project. Since then, actually, Power to Change came along brilliantly and helped fund the completion of this project. So this is the first subsidy-free community solar farm completed in 2009, 7.3 megawatts, half of which is subsidy-free. So, massive achievement, and hats off to Power to Change for stepping in and making that happen. So we're still using that as a kind of live example about how our PPA could work, although that site is now kind of built out. So the other project example is Devon Energy Collective, and this is an organisation that's been set up this year. It's to be owned by all the existing local community energy enterprises in Devon, with a kind of ambition to get to 100 megawatts of local community-owned solar. With that deployment of new community renewables being backed by long-term PPAs with public sector bodies. So that's kind of the mantra. That's what we're trying to do. And again, we've been testing our thinking and looking at what the kind of both the procurement routes are and what the contractual structures are that could enable that ambition. So so within setting up Devon CIC, Devon Energy CIC, there's a range of work around finding and delivering, the sites and stuff. So we've got kind of site kind of pipeline development work, but what we're talking about today is on the PPA model and the procurement routes for that. So it's really important for community energy groups to understand, why a public body would be interested. The fact they made it a climate emergency is obviously a reason, but I kind of think it's useful just to think what the kind of drivers for them coming to the table are. So, and how they might be different from a community energy local solar PPA from those that are just available from buying elsewhere in the country. So any standard sort of solar PPA can provide that local authority with the opportunity to support generated green power with REGOs. It can, through that, stimulate new generation projects, and it can provide cost savings to the organisation's kind of revenue costs in terms of utility bills. Those things are all doable, nothing particularly magical about that kind of thing. The question we really want to try and explore is, how do we get additional benefits from a local community solar PPA? So, Plymouth could choose to do a PPA with an organisation in East Anglia, but then there would be less local social value that could be generated out of that from Plymouth's own purchasing decision. So that social value, I mean, you guys know this, it's part of why you exist, but it's about keeping that spend local, so profits and surpluses are supported, kept within the local community. And it's also, it can provide an opportunity for those public bodies and local government to invest and generate a return from that local project. So the options we're talking about here, there's three broadly. I'll put my caveat in at this point. So there'll probably be lawyers and procurement specialists that are absolutely turning in, or I won't say turning in their grave, they're alive. They'll be shuddering at the idea of me sort of kind of hashing up legal and procurement terms. So I put my apologies in now. I'm not an expert in this space, but this is our learning from where we are now. But broadly, we've got three PPA options if you're a public body. Private wire we're not going to consider here, but effectively, yeah, if that public body lives next door to a potential solar farm, they could just put a wire under the fence. That's pretty straightforward, relatively. What we're talking about here is a remote situation where we're talking about sleeved or what are called synthetic PPA arrangements. I'm just going to talk through those two in a little bit more detail. So a sleeved power purchase agreement is where a community energy enterprise, so CE nomenclature, enter into an agreement with that public body to supply electricity over the distribution network. So they haven't got their own wire, they're supplying it over that distribution network. And then the community energy group will need to then agree a PPA contract with a licensed supplier. The terms of that contract will need to mirror the terms that they've set up with the public body. And then that licensed supplier will need to charge fees for the settling and balancing roles it plays in terms of sleeving that contract. And so there will be an uplift in terms of the actual cost the energy is received at the off-taker, i.e. the public body. So that is one option. This is not particularly innovative. Sleeve contracts are out and about there, that we can use them. The other is a kind of a synthetic contract. PPA was called synthetic PPAs, but really they're not really a power purchase agreement. They are purely a financial instrument that sits separately from the power purchase agreement. So in this situation, a community energy enterprise has a PPA as it would do normally with the licensed supplier. And then the power purchase, the public body, the local government organisation also has a normal power supply agreement. What the synthetic PPA does is sets a financial instrument similar to a contract for difference, which facilitates payments between the community energy group and that public body, adjusted to sort of as wholesale power prices change. So you'll be familiar with contracts for difference, and that's around using a strike price and payments from the buyer when it's in a certain position to the seller when the price is below a certain point on that strike price, and vice versa when it's above. So in this world, one of those characteristics, there's a bit of work to be done about how we agree a strike price for that community energy organisation. And, in a world where we haven't got a reverse auction or something, so there's some work to do there. And equally, how does the issues associated with the social value that community energy group is providing within that service, how is that reflected within that agreement? So in terms of those are the two contractual options that we've kind of been looking at for the power purchase, and these are the kind of procurement options. And having worked in local government for a while and kind of always keen to find a way around public procurement and make it as easy as possible. If you speak to local government officers and you talk to them about procurement, their faces will often drop. But there is a good reason why there's public procurement regulations in place, and it's to stop people just doing dodgy deals on the side with public money. So there is due process there, but that due process can complicate this situation around trying to get community energy and supplies into local government. So just comparing the options for the two types of contract, with a sleeved contract, public procurement regulations would apply. So the question therefore is then, how can that public body run a procurement process that reflects the value of a community energy approach? So the social value, environmental benefit of a community energy approach, but it needs some innovation within those procurement approaches to make sure that's reflected and that the public body is not just counting it on price. And then also, how can that community energy group prove its social value in a way that works within that process? If we use a synthetic PPA, this is a financial instrument, and Directive 201465/EU around financial instruments means that this issue sits outside the public procurement regs, and therefore theoretically there's nothing to stop a local government, another public body getting together with a community energy group and doing a synthetic PPA without needing to procure it. A public body or local government will still need to prove best value and have a case for that, but that can be done in a different and often more flexible way than public procurement regs. And also there's still a question about, in that situation, how do we agree the strike price for the CFD? So alongside those those are statements of fact, they're out there. We've had legal views on that kind of stuff. Alongside that, we're seeing a kind of emergent, driven by some innovative thinking within particular local authorities, as well as lots of local authorities now coming to their normal route of energy supply and saying, how can we, they're posing these questions, how can we generate, how can we get more local generation, how can we use our procurement muscle to get more renewables deployed? They're asking those questions. And there's some great work being done by Preston on the Social Value Act, which gives local authorities the power to procure differently. And Bristol City Council have started to put this into place, as with as others, where effectively it's starting to put criteria within normal public procurements, which really allow community energy groups and other kind of groups with those kind of local spend kind of criteria to compete on issues other than price. And Bristol City Council and Leydier, who are a kind of a provider of services to lots of local government around forward purchasing of energy and providing energy purchasing hedging services to local government, are exploring a new kind of procurement approach called a dynamic purchasing system, which again provides a different way for community energy groups to engage and local supply to be favoured in some form within that procurement route. So again, the essay question is, how can public bodies procure energy in a manner that supports community energy? And whilst we haven't got that full answer yet, where we are in terms of our learning today is that there's kind of a couple of options basically, and that weren't around or weren't very clear to us only 6 months ago. So let's be clear, local authorities won't all be the same. Public bodies aren't all, they'll have different approaches. So some of these regs are the same, but how they're interpreted and the local political or officer drivers will be different from local authority to local authority. So here's an example of how it could work. So public body A, local government group X, has a specific community energy group that's got an established relationship in one form or another, and it's got a project and it wishes to work with that group. That group, that public body is comfortable that it can agree a strike price, and that the group's social and environmental intentions can demonstrate best value to it. So, and in that world, that local group could go, it doesn't need to procure, and therefore is much simpler contractual kind of arrangement. It doesn't need a procurement route to get to around a synthetic PPA. There's still some hurdles you've got to get over around best value, but local government has more flexibility about how it can prove that. And so the kind of key thing then becomes is, all right, how do we agree a price that is fair in the long term? And then you've got a different type of public body, that might have a more generic wish to support community energy in the round, but may not have a particular group that it wishes to work, or it wishes to use a procurement framework to even like to tease that out. And so there are now options out there in the market for local government organisations and other public bodies to use dynamic purchasing systems. Bristol City Council have got one, Leydier are establishing one kind of thing, to establish either a sleeved or synthetic approaches. And those procurement approaches, which are more flexible and more, we believe, community energy friendly, provide effectively a kind of mechanism with which the social and environmental value of those kind of local kind of choices can be built into the tender assessment process. So next steps for us is to take that learning and move on. We're working on a bit of work to look at what the mechanisms would be for fair pricing mechanism. So we're not going to go through and all. So where a local authority wishes to go direct and just do a synthetic PPA, how do we achieve a fair price? We think there's models out there, and we're looking at some good thinking from Bristol City Council on that already. Others. There are now Leydier, this Leydier organisation, have now got a framework out there. They're establishing that, and we need to test it. We need to test that. So we need to have partnerships between community energy groups and local authorities that test the way that social value will be expressed and weighted within those within that procurement approach. And community energy groups need a mechanism to make sure that they've got the numbers that can reflect that. So when a procurement approach is there and setting out a set of criteria, they've got some numbers to demonstrate the social value that they can generate, either through the way they're keeping spend local, or through how they're procuring local contractors, or how they're distributing their community surpluses. And finally, there was a poll that I think the kind people at Community Energy England were going to run for me at the end of this, which was just to test the audience's kind of interest in this. Again, we're tabling this as lessons that we've learnt to date. We would like to develop some of this into a toolkit where we can share, a bit similar to what Community Energy London have done. And with a view that there's a bit of templates that can be replicated in different areas. So finally, yeah, that's me and where you can find me. This work is also, being headed up by Jake Berniat from CFR, Communities for Renewables, who is supporting the Devon Energy Collective work, and Alistair Mumford at Devon. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Alistair. I think your slides got a bit stuck towards the end, but everything you said was very clear, and the slides will be circulated anyway, so people can review them afterwards. Okay. Are we doing a poll for Alistair, John?
Unfortunately, that one hasn't come through.
Okay.
Oh well.
Okay. All right then. Well, thank you very much, Alistair. I think there'll be a few questions for you at the end, but in the meantime, can we move on to Caroline Byrd from Bristol Energy Network to talk about a community energy toolkit for community groups and local authorities.
Okay, so hello everybody. I need to do the screen sharing thing too. So let me see if I can make that work. So does that work from a screen share perspective?
That looks great. Thank you very much.
Cool. Okay. So I'm hoping this is going to move forwards as well. So I'm chair of Bristol Energy Network. Bristol Energy Network is an umbrella organisation for community energy groups in the city. And actually, we're not just about community energy groups, but communities and community energy, or communities that are interested in energy one way and another. So that's kind of where we come from. That's who we are. And I'm going to talk about a toolkit that we've been putting together working with Bristol City Council and Community Energy England. Now, the point of the toolkit is that it's a practical thing that will help community groups and local authorities work together to harness the power of local energy. We recognise that different authorities and different community energy groups will work in different ways, but we hope this is a useful kind of overview of the ways that we might work together. So the focus of the toolkit is on how we can work together, particularly thinking about the climate emergency. We know that, you may not know, but Bristol City Council was the first local authority to declare a climate emergency. So that gives an additional drive to putting this toolkit together. But actually we, Bristol Energy Network and the City Council, have been working together in different ways for a while. We recognise it's really important that we have a sustainable, inclusive and socially just energy system. And the way to achieve that seems to be through doing it at a local level. Cities are a great place to start to do these sorts of things, putting citizens at the centre and trying to make something that's equitable.
Sorry to interrupt you, Caroline, but I don't know if you've started to move your slides on, but we're still on the first one.
I have started to move them on, yeah. Okay.
That's worked now. I can see the next one. So
where are we on now? Are we on the what, how, why?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, we missed one, but it wasn't a huge one, so that's fine.
No worries.
Now it's not letting me move it forwards. What's going on there? Okay. So is that moving forwards?
My view's gone very funny. I don't know about anybody else's.
Oops. No.
Closing this end. I want to stop sharing and start sharing again, Caroline.
Okay, I can do that. Okay, I'll give it another go.
Sorry to have interrupted.
No, that's fine. It's fine. You need to, you know, you need to see it properly. Well, it's better if you can see it. So, right.
Bristol story one now. Bristol story one now we've got.
Yes. Okay. That's what you should have. Let's hope it moves forward next time I try and move it forwards. So, yeah, I guess I just wanted to get backwards a little bit to tell you kind of where this came from, because like I said, Bristol City Council and Bristol Energy Network have been working together gently for a while. And it really started in 2010. I guess it started before that, but particularly in 2010 with Copenhagen and the Climate Act and a number of other things, issues around peak oil, really drove community energy at that stage. And we had a number of different types of community energy groups that were getting together to do things like put solar panels on community buildings, develop neighbourhood responses, and show retrofit through the Green Doors initiative. And the City Council Energy Services team came about at the same time. And we thought the best thing to do was to try and put together a network that enabled us to share all of those things and to learn from each other. We then developed a community energy strategy in 2013, and that was before the UK national one and probably the first one in the country. We were also Bristol, we were European Green Capital in 2015. So Bristol's been doing this kind of stuff for a while, and sometimes I suppose Bristol's at the front of these things, or that we try and do things a bit differently, maybe as evidenced in the last couple of weeks by what's been going on around the Black Lives Matter issue as well, and the Colston statue, which has been all over the press globally. So Bristol has a bit of history in these sorts of things. Okay, now my slide's not moving forwards, it's pinging at me, there we go. So have you got Bristol Story 2, just to check?
Yep.
Yay, okay, that worked, brilliant. Yeah, so the City Council managed to get some central government and EU funding to support the acceleration of community energy. And at that stage, we felt it was really important that as an energy network, we got involved with what they were doing and to make sure that the funding was used in the most constructive way possible. So although the City Council had an idea about what they thought they wanted to do, they brought that idea to one of our open meetings, and we helped them to shape it and to develop an outreach approach that worked with their community energy fund that they were setting up to make sure that we tried to bring new people into thinking about energy. We thought that was really important, that rather than just the community energy groups that had existed to that point, that we brought new voices into thinking about energy. And since then, the City Council's been quite successful in securing funding for projects, and they very much recognise that working with communities and community energy groups is important to securing inclusion, to getting proper engagement, to widening the diversity of the work that they've been doing. And we've had 2 very successful conferences last year and the year before that have helped to cement that relationship, I guess, and bring some really good speakers into the city. So, I mean, I guess, you know, we know this, local energy delivers sustainability benefits. Well, yes, of course, it's, you know, it's more than just energy. It's about tackling climate change. It's about reducing carbon emissions, but it's also about helping people out of fuel poverty, about health and well-being, you know, resilient, engaged communities. We can do all sorts of things with local energy if we're clever and we think about it. So there are mutual wider benefits if we get this right. And also, you know, as I said there, it works for economic benefits as well. We can create local jobs. We can keep money in the local economy. The same sorts of things that, you know, they were talking about in London as well. You know, we recognise that's a really important aspect to how we might work together. So, you know, we've developed this toolkit together. The toolkit is practical. It gives some background to why community energy is a good idea, why we might want to work together with local authorities. But it also talks about what local authorities can do for community energy to make it more successful and to sort of produce more, to give more resources, I guess, to community energy groups. So things like making sites available, providing small pots of funding, the soft support, you know, the stuff that doesn't really cost the local authority anything, but which is really beneficial to community energy groups. And then, you know, that in turn provides benefits back into the local authority. So it's a real kind of synergistic, beneficial relationship if we get it right. And the local authorities or the local authority members that we work with need to be able to work out not just who they're working with in their particular silo, but to communicate across departments. And I think that came up in the London example as well. So we reckon there are some shared processes. So if we're developing a community energy project, or if the local authority is developing some sort of energy project, you know, there are things we both need to do. You know, we need to make the case. We need to make the case to our citizens, to our communities. As a local authority, they might need to make the case to their members, to other officers in the authority, to the budget holders. We need to think about who the stakeholders are, you know, all sorts of different levels, you know, who will benefit from this, why do we need to do this? And then this mutual benefits thing, I mentioned it already, but, you know, if we can identify, we've called it a sweet spot, I think, in the toolkit, but, you know, if we can identify the mutual benefits, you know, why is it good for communities? Why is it good for the local authority? What are the things that, or what's the initiative that will tick lots of boxes that will, you know, maximise beneficial use of resources and make the best outcomes for the city? Engagement and discussion, of course, is really important. You know, how do we engage most effectively? How do we engage the right people at the right level? And then, you know, of course, funding and resources and evaluation, that kind of goes without saying. We need to work out how we secure funding. You know, as communities, we have access to different funding, I guess, from a local authority. You know, we can do crowdfunding in a way that maybe the local authority might not be able to do so easily, but then the local authority can apply to big pots of funding that smaller community groups can't. So, you know, if we can bring those things together, we can benefit together. So I just wanted to touch on a few case studies of stuff that we've done in Bristol that you might be interested in. They're case studies that are in the toolkit. So this is an example of an area of the city that's one of the less affluent parts of the city, with a very active community group in Ambition Lawrence Weston. And Bristol Energy Co-op and Ambition Lawrence Weston reckoned that a way of generating more money for that local area was if they could set up a solar farm on the edge of the community, which would then generate benefits back into the local community. And the city council were very instrumental in helping to make this happen by providing the land and by providing bridging finance. And that's a really successful example of how those kinds of relationships come together to provide benefits for everybody. A different example, we've had a community energy fund as well, and Bristol City Council set that up initially with money that came from central government. They secured some project money, and they wanted to do more community energy. Do in inverted commas, from a local government perspective is maybe slightly different, but they were very keen to make sure that there was more money going to the local community. And as Bristol Energy Network and with our members, we thought that if that was going to happen, we need to make sure it was really inclusive, that it was really broad in its appeal, that it was easy to apply for, that a range of communities could access it. So we were instrumental in making sure the process worked in that way, that the assessing panel was really representative of different communities, and that with the outreach worker that I mentioned earlier on, we could access or go out and talk to different communities who might never have thought about energy before, to sort of see what their issues might be, if there's something around energy that they were concerned about, and help them put together a funding bid to an energy fund that they may never have thought of before, but with this fund set up in the right way, really increase that kind of access. And the final case study, we've been working with the City Council on a big EU funded project called Replicate. And we've just been working on a really small part of it, in recognition by the council that in order to engage a properly representative sample of the community in the research, they needed to do more than what they might normally do in putting out flyers and putting stuff on websites. So we carried out an engagement piece, really co-designing the approach to make sure that we engaged properly across the community, working with local community groups that were nothing to do with energy, but which, through working with them, we could raise energy awareness and get a proper representative demographic into the project. So that's what the toolkit looks like. There's 20 pages of it. There is a much longer report, which is where we started. There were about 50 pages in the original report, and we realized when we started to talk to our membership that actually 50 pages was too long. It's interesting, but people are not going to read it. So we pulled it back, we made it more accessible, and this is the outcome. So, you know, do go have a look. I hope you'll find it useful. And I'm just going to do a very quick shameless plug at the end of my presentation. I'm also a researcher working at Bristol University. I'm working on a project called Energy Rev, and we are interested in the skills and knowledge that we need for the future energy system. We've done research with community energy groups, and we've devised a survey which is aimed at community energy groups. We'd really love you guys to complete it if you could. That would be really useful in working out the skills and training that we need for the future energy system. And finally, another even more shameless plug, we're organising ICT for Sustainability online conference in 2 weeks' time. It's free to join, and I hope that you'll find some stuff that's interesting that you'd like to have a look at. That's me.
Thank you very much. We've now got the poll function working that Alistair wanted, with the questions Alistair wanted to ask you. So I think John's going to put that up, and we'll spend a minute on that, and then we'll move to questions and answers. It just says hosts and panelists cannot vote. Oh, that's fine. That's just me. Everyone else can vote. Carry on. Right. If everybody's done that, can we have all the panelists with their videos and mics on so we can start the questions? John, are you going to share us the results of the poll now or in a bit?
Oh, there we go.
That's interesting. There's quite a few questions relating to this, some of which cover topics the other presenters have talked about. The most popular question was, when you are talking about local authority engagement, are you focusing on councillors or officers, and on which departments? And I think a few of you have picked up that it depends on the local authority and where different responsibilities sit within different local authorities. But I don't know, sorry to come back to you, Caroline, because you've just finished speaking, whether you've got any advice on for actually working out which bits of a council you might want to target first.
Well, we're quite lucky in Bristol because we've got a specific energy service. So I guess that's where we work with mostly. And then they're the ones on the whole that will go and talk to housing or other parts of the authority. And we work with that group, particularly the energy service, but we also work with the relevant local councillors as well. So it's not just members or not just officers, it's a bit of both. But I think getting officers on board is really important.
Syed, do you want to comment on that with your experience?
Yeah, in practice, you need to speak to as many people as you can do, because I don't want to criticise local authorities, but quite often different departments don't necessarily talk to one another as well as they could do. So inevitably, the energy officer, if they have one, and again, back to my point about austerity, many local authorities are not blessed as Islington has with a full complement of the team. But clearly, with the climate emergency declarations, as was pointed out, there's usually a lead councillor and maybe possibly two who've supported and pushed forward the climate emergency declaration. That's the first good point of entry. Officers who are working on that climate emergency declaration, identify them, because one of the things I've been finding time and time again, those energy and climate officers who are usually generally ignored by some councils suddenly become very important and find they have a budget line after a climate emergency declaration has been signed. So I would say as many as you can do. Community energy groups are often spread across the local authority area. Speak to your local councillor, get involved in the consultations as they come through, not only in terms of climate emergency, but also in housing and wider environmental issues. And if you have a project, no matter how small, make sure you let officers and councils know about it, because it's often those small initial projects that kind of like, you know, spur on kind of interest from the council and then can lead to other opportunities.
Thank you. And Liz or Alistair, from inside a council, do you have any advice on whether it's better to approach officers or councillors first, or to go for a twin track approach and speak to as many people, or not even twin track, multiple track, and speak to as many people as possible? Do you want to go first, Alistair?
Yeah, I think Syed, you've got to go where the opportunity is, and you know there isn't a one size fits all approach. It's going to depend on your local authority and who your contacts are within that. You know, to take it where the opportunity is. I think there will be a nominated officer, any nominated councillor that's led the climate emergency declaration. So if you haven't got anything else, that is your democratically elected lead. So go to them. If there's an energy service, go in there, or do both.
Do you want to add anything, Liz?
No, I completely agree. Do as many channels, contact as many channels as you can, because there's different interests by different councillors, officers, etc. So someone will be able to get something moving.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to skip the next question because I know there's some at the bottom that I think are more relevant to this panel. The next question is, is the community energy sector better working local government and national? I think maybe we can try and pick that up later. Some of the questions at the bottom are around PPAs and what are the opportunities. What are the opportunities and what does that mean for different people? So Devon Energy Collective, is the idea that the Devon Energy Collective will develop its own projects, or will it share them out amongst its members?
The idea is either. So we recognise there's a need for an umbrella organisation to broker some of the agreements. So that Devon Energy Collective could end up developing its own schemes and then distributing the funds through.
Oh dear, seem to have lost Alistair in the middle of his answer.
You might have lost power.
Right. So we'll go back to a question for Liz then, because you're still with us. What has there's a question here specifically about your funding. Have you added up in terms of number of sites and kilowatts? It's the amount of number of sites it's delivered in terms of total kilowatt generation or carbon saved?
Yes, we have. We've had 31 projects. Some of those are we call them 31 projects, but some of them were feasibility studies that then went on to a full project. So we funded 31 separate applications. We reckon adding everybody's up that will save about 121 tons of CO2 per annum from these projects. And that's why I think it's very important to decide, now that we've declared a climate emergency, going forward, we'll probably favour projects that are bigger carbon savings than others. That's not to say we won't fund all the projects if we have the money, but if there's a bit of a which one should we fund, I think going forward with all the climate declarations, it might be that when you're setting up a carbon fund, you might want to, or an energy fund, you might want to consider how much carbon savings you will need to create from each project, or how much energy generation you'll need to create to get towards your net zero targets in future.
Sorry, Alistair, we lost you, so we moved on to another question. Was there anything else you wanted to say about the Devon Energy Collective?
Well, just brief, I'm not sure at what point I cut out, but yeah, so Devon Energy Collective exists as an umbrella that can support, it can either lead the development of projects where it identifies them, but it can help broker projects that an individual group couldn't do, because it has a reach that can negotiate with larger corporates and local authorities. But equally, if an existing established community energy group was already there and had the capacity to develop its project, it would always allow that local group to do it first. So we've kind of been through that in our governance process to avoid any kind of competitive tension between the two.
That sort of moves on to one of the next questions, which is selling energy to a local authority or other public body more of an option for a bigger, more established community energy group, or is it feasible for smaller and newer groups too? I don't know if Syed or Caroline, you'd like to speak about that first.
Only in the sense that yes, it's more attractive to bigger groups in the first instance, but as we hopefully have more models and examples of this, aggregation of smaller projects have a role to play as well. We're only in the early stages of that. In London, we're particularly keen that as we hopefully see over the decade, more and more projects come forward. The urban environment in London necessitates that these schemes are typically smaller. They're not a 3 megawatt solar farm or a 20 megawatt wind turbine, but they are locally placed in areas where users are using energy on site. They have a value on the distribution grid, and hopefully that can be valued as well in terms of any PPA that can be signed. So in London, we're very optimistic that Transport for London, which is one of the biggest energy users in the whole of the UK, will start entering into those discussions. We haven't had much success as yet. So bigger is unfortunately better in most instances from a city perspective, but the agglomeration of smaller projects have a role to play as well, I would argue.
Caroline, do you want to say anything? You're on mute.
Yeah, I don't have a huge amount to add to what Syed said. I mean, I suppose in Bristol we haven't had a huge number of small energy generation projects within the city yet. Mostly it's been Bristol Energy Co-op, so they've managed to aggregate what they've been doing to work with the city council. I can see that changing in the next few years, but yeah, I think the same issues aside.
And we've got about 4 minutes left, and there's a question here I'm going to adapt slightly so you can all answer it. The question is, how can we ensure community energy opportunities in London are shared equitably? But I think that applies to community energy wherever it is. So I mean, the point being that different boroughs but different localities have, anywhere you are, have very different demographics and financial resources. So what are your experiences or thoughts about sharing the benefits of community energy equitably? Liz, do you want to go first on that one?
Sure. It's very difficult to talk about funding because obviously Islington has had a huge amount of funding through building, whereas other councils just don't have that kind of income. So from the financial point of view, it's difficult. There are things that we can do. For example, Islington has taken some of our carbon offset funding to fund some projects like our Bunhill 2 energy centre, which is taking waste heat from the London Underground to power a CHP system for about, I think, 800 local homes, schools, leisure centres. That is something that we've piloted now that we want to go forward and replicate with TfL across London and anywhere else who has a waste heat from data centres or any kind of industrial process. So we're looking at how can we use our funding to do something in the borough, but then can be replicable that we can then share. So then all you have to do, is hopefully get the manual and do it. It's not that easy, but hopefully we can at least share our learning and our experiences to a bigger degree than just a how-to manual.
And obviously you focused your funding at projects that can target fuel poverty, as well as a way of spreading out the benefits of community energy. Syed, please, you want to go say something?
Just one quick point building on Liz's, which is just to say that clearly councils are picking up the gauntlet on climate emergency, but many councils, especially in London, have a number of other priorities. And it could be everything from local air pollution to housing issues to availability of green spaces, even to knife crime. And I think one of the key things is that they have to look at some of their key priorities through the lens of what some of the energy projects that are being delivered could bring. So could they help in terms of better housing and health, in terms of energy efficiency? Could they deliver new routes for actually bringing forward slugs of money that could be diverted to other primary areas of care for the local authority? Could they develop in terms of funding monitoring for air pollution? Could they help in terms of funding green space? So all too often, sometimes it's kind of slightly middle class issues on climate change and other issues that may be more relevant to certain parts of the community. I think when I've been talking to council and saying the two can be merged together, and you need to bear that in mind, otherwise you'll not bring the community along in terms of your very ambitious climate emergency plans.
Thank you very much. We've got not any time left at all. I'm sorry about that. There's some very interesting questions that have been asked about the PPAs and specifics around that. Sorry, we've not had chance to get to them. Hopefully we can address them in another time and place. But all I've got time left to do is to say thank you very much to all the speakers. That was absolutely fascinating. There's lots of things to learn there and for other people to be able to take away use in their local areas. So thank you very much for your time and willingness to share all your information. Now we have 5 minutes for a tea break before we start the next session. So thank you very much, everybody. Cheers.
Hello, everybody. So it's now 20 minutes past 3, and we are due to start a new session until 4:15. This session is called New Markets, Innovative Way Forwards, and we will hear from 3 different speakers on the topic. Just to start with, a bit of an introduction. I'm Anne-Claire from Northern Powergrid. We are the DNO for the Northeast, Yorkshire and North Lincolnshire. So the equivalent of Electricity Northwest, where Helen works, but for another part of the country. And we too are very supportive of the community energy sector, and you can hear more about how we are supportive in our community energy strategy on the 18th of June, where we will hold an hour webinar. Myself, I am the DSO transition manager for the company, in charge of managing our change to contributing to a smarter, flexible, cleaner energy system. The topic of the next hour is new markets and innovative way forward. And this is where, as an observer, I'm always in awe of the endless creativity of community energy groups. The sector really does challenge the established retailers in a big way, and it introduces, I believe, real competition in the market. So you may have had the pleasure to hear from this topic, new markets, during Community Energy England's spring conference back in April. And if so, you will have a taste for the creativity that I'm talking about, you know, such as generating hydrogen on the Isle of Wight from surplus wind, or combining heat and solar PV on new housing development. And then you also heard from Alistair from Plymouth as well this afternoon. I've always personally supported the idea that the health of competition in the retail market should be measured according to the variety of business models rather than a simple count of suppliers as it currently is, because that is not real competition, it's just different brands. And this is really where ideas flourish and the art of possible is being challenged to the benefit of social impact, as you've heard again this afternoon. So if you discount the barriers that are emerging from regulation, the minutiae of codes and rules that currently really stifle, I believe, innovation in the retail space of energy, the real challenge here is to make sure that the value generated by a project makes its way down the supply chain so that it can be shared amongst the parties who are contributing to the effort, rather than stay stuck with you know, the usual big parties, or perhaps the bigger companies. And that really is, I believe, the tricky part. So with that said, I will introduce 3 speakers who will share their insights and their experience. And the first one is Pete from Bath and West Community Energy.
Thank you very much, Anne-Claire. Thank you. I feel I'm competing slightly with the rain that's just started chucking it down here, and it's very loud on my window, so I'm hoping that everybody can hear me okay. But let me just share my screen.
And just to confirm, we can hear you fine.
Thank you, that's good. So I'd like to talk a little bit about a few opportunities that we at Bath and West Community Energy see for community energy going forward. And I'm really keen to hear whether any of these things resonate with other people as well. So just quickly first, Bath and West Community Energy, like many organisations, we've been successful in raising significant sums of money. We've put money into a community fund, now over 200,000, into an independent charity that we set up for community work on carbon reduction and fuel poverty. And with the funds we've raised, we've developed 12 megawatts primarily community solar PV across ground-mounted schemes, rooftops, and one a water wheel. More recently, we started looking again for new solar projects and new wind projects. And over the last couple of years, we've been branching out or trying to transition away just from investment in renewables, looking at potentially delivering services, particularly around demand shifting, flexibility and demand reduction. But that's a work in progress, and a bit more on that in a bit. So I wanted to pick out 3 opportunities for community energy. And when I talk about kind of local energy for local people, I'm not wanting to get into a debate about what I mean by supply. We've heard that there are lots of views on that, and a discussion for another time. All I'm trying to flag up is that I think there's a strong need to bring people closer to their sources of electricity. We have a bit of a flick and forget mentality around energy. We flick the light switch on and then forget about it. The closer that we can bring local renewable energy projects into people's world, the more likely we are to encourage a greater awareness about demand and carbon reduction. So in that context, though, we need 3 things. We need a lot more sites, as Tom was saying right at the beginning. We need sites all over the country, community renewables, urban and rural. We need, in order to create those sites, we need more secure income streams, and we need to adapt the way that we look at generation so that it is more flexible, so that we can create more value for the generation that we produce. And I just wanted to pick out 3 opportunities across those themes, and opportunities that we haven't talked about before today, because I totally share the views that we heard earlier about the importance of local authorities. We're kind of very pleased, proud to have a very strong cooperation agreement with our local authority, Bath and North East Somerset, and been very productive in the work that we've done, and also the whole debate around long-term PPAs for local authorities. But so I wanted to pick out 3 different issues. On the more local sites point, the climate emergency that we've had and that we hear about has had a significant impact also on town and parish councils. In our area, we have got a number that have launched declared their own climate emergencies, inspired in part by the local authority, Bath and North East Somerset, announcing theirs, and neighbouring authorities like Wiltshire. And we're seeing that interest now in discussions with parish councils. And like somebody was saying earlier about local authorities, there's a real desire to understand, well, what as town and parish councils can we do? And there's some concern about renewable energy, but that's where community renewables has significant appeal, because immediately we're talking about projects that hopefully will bring the community far more on side. So it has a lot of resonance with town and parish councils. And I should say that the ones listed here and across our area, there's quite a wide range in different demographics, for pockets of rural poverty, as well as true blue areas, kind of belonging part of Jacob Rees-Mogg's constituency. So to see that range of local communities also signing up to climate emergencies is very encouraging, not always knowing what's involved though. And so importantly thinking, well, what is the role then for parish councils? So my slides now are not moving on. Here we go. So town and parish council, from our perspective, based on the conversations that we're having, there's a lot of support for pre-feasibility studies site search. So on a number of cases, we're working with the parish council to identify potential sites, looking for funding from the Rural Community Energy Fund, for example, particularly because parish councils themselves have very strong links with landowners, site owners, and can often tell you where to be going in terms of those landowners that might be particularly interested and those that might not. Some parish councils have their own land. So in at least one case, possibly two, we're talking to parish councils that have land themselves that they're really keen to get something built on. Also, a number of parish councils have approached us around thinking about finance. So they can secure finance as well, Public Works Loan Board, and also some parish councils are thinking about increasing precept to raise funds for climate action. None of them have yet done anything. I'd be really interested to hear from anybody else as to whether they've had experience where town parish councils have actually raised finance and or raised money through their precept. It'd be great to have some examples of that. But to see the interest in that from this area is really encouraging. Perhaps though, an even more powerful element is the degree to which working through town parish councils, you can begin to get the local community even more engaged. So a lot of local enthusiasm and champions. So want to know who's arguing with who in the local community, who needs to kind of be got on side, then there will be people there that you can talk to and find out about the local networks at a deeper level than you may already have. Already we're seeing quite a lot of support for potential outreach within local communities, with councils wanting to run events and to engage their community either as part of neighbourhood plan or parish plan activities or not. Ultimately, support in planning is also a potential thing. And so this engagement with communities we've seen significantly. We tried to support through an initiative we launched around solar spotters, trying to encourage people in the community to identify sites for potential solar systems. We started off looking for sites for rooftop solar, this is in particular, from a very technical approach, identifying rooftops that look good, and found that actually you then ran up against site owners that weren't really interested. This way, turning it around, getting sites that are enthusiastic, we're starting to see some real benefit from that. And we've got resources on our website, and we encourage people to fill out an expression of interest so they can tick off things that mean that hopefully it filters some of the inquiries. So that's a very short-term thing that we're kind of focusing on now, a short to medium-term thing, looking at more secure income streams. So we've seen with COVID-19 up to 50% of the UK workforce working remotely now, working from home. And for us, the essay question following Alistair Macpherson's presentation earlier was, how can community energy help responsible employers to cut carbon and create social value in the new normal that follows? Because ultimately, businesses are now outsourcing their carbon emissions, their scope 1 and 2 carbon emissions, into the community, to their employees. And okay, we're seeing cut in transport emissions, which is great, but it would be even better if businesses looked at ways of offsetting those carbon emissions that they're now beginning to outsource. So we're wanting to create a project that's looking at this, taking some of the learning from the work with long-term PPAs with local authorities and asking the question, can we apply that to businesses? Create an offer to businesses based on long-term PPAs that could be private wire. That's the straightforward way, and this just becomes a hook for businesses to put solar on their building roofs, but potentially through the sleeved routes that Alistair was talking about before, potentially investment in local projects as well as a way of offsetting. Also offers opportunities for links with employees and providing another route for engaging community, as well as providing links with other community energy services, so domestic auditing, advice, heat loss surveys. We're working with the Cheese Project, which some of you may have come across. Really interesting heat loss survey through thermal imaging approach, which again, if we've got community energy services that we can integrate into an offer for businesses, then that adds real value. We need a strong and innovative energy supply partner to work alongside with PPAs, and we're in discussions. But again, it'd be really interesting to hear from others whether this is something that people would be interested in working on, and has value in your view too. A third area, and this is the medium to long-term bit, more flexible networks. So in a world where electricity demand's going up, wholesale electricity prices are going down, grid capacity is a major, major constraint, and we're competing against gas, peaking plant, and not always winning. We're under real pressure to try and find ways to match generation from renewable energy more closely to demand so that we can create value and reduce grid impact. And we know for those people that are working in this area that this is just an emerging market for local electricity, local flexibility. And there are a number of really interesting projects that other community energy groups are doing, Carbon Co-op, Low Carbon Hub, Repowering London, a whole range of other things that are going on. We also started a program called Flex Community. We're working with Spanish partners, STEMI Energy, who have a flexibility platform that we're adapting for use within the UK. We've great to have got funding from Power to Change. We've just had notification that we have EU funding as well through Horizon 2020 as part of a consortium with Spanish, Italian and Croatian communities led by Communist University in Madrid. So that'll be a really exciting extension to the program, whereby we're looking to utilize cloud-based platform to communicate with DNOs and the national markets for flexibility. We're starting off with hot water heating. Over the next few months, we're looking at space heating, EV charge points and solar PV. So that's something that we're really interested in, because we think it is going to play an important part in creating value, but it's going to take a while for those markets to develop. I think, though, from a community perspective, the thing I'd say is that quite often we're looking at saying, well, what can flexibility provide for communities? I think also we should be saying, what can communities provide for flexibility? Because in order to see the growth of the market at domestic scale for flexibility and the rollout of half-hourly settlement within the domestic sector, it's a whole new market there. And it's difficult to see how the domestic market for flexibility is really going to take off unless we can involve intermediaries, communities and local authorities in a way that can draw local people into the debate. And clearly from a community perspective, we have the outreach, we can aggregate small consumers, we can build on the trust inherent within the community projects and address some of the data issues around the concerns that people have around sharing data and platform. And importantly, I think there's a real control issue here. We have a number of different models for flexibility. Rather than flick and forget, there's the fit and forget approach, where we just implement a black box in our house and effectively the cloud takes care of when our appliances come on and off. And that kind of future, I think, disempowers householders, disempowers consumers. And I think there's a simplistic view that we just need to take the human dimension out of this, and therefore everything will move a lot smoother. But in reality, we know whenever we've tried to do that before, the human dimension just keeps wanting to come back in, whether it was automated control in a plant, in buildings, whatever. So I think—
Not wishing to cut short this very interesting topic, close to my heart as a DNO. Can I ask you to wrap up, please, so we make sure we have time for the previous speaker? Thank you.
Sure. So I think communities can provide that element of control too within the way that the systems are set up, and ensuring that that is a key functionality within platforms. So to summarize, whilst regulation's still a major barrier to local supply, and I do think community supply as energy suppliers is not necessarily the model, but I think there's a lot that we can do to create a greater link between consumers and local projects just a snapshot here. And I think in creating the development capacity, we do have options for this. What about negotiating with members to pay less interest to create resource to support project development? There's a whole range of innovation projects that we need to be getting involved in, but we need to know what those innovation projects are and what the opportunities are. We need to be able to get access to that information. Ultimately, community energy, I think, is held back by a focus just on what we've achieved in the past. We need to be looking forward and what can we achieve in the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Pete. Very interesting insight and lovely enthusiasm as well to re-energize us in this Friday afternoon. I'll now introduce Daniel from Charge My Street. Daniel, you are on mute.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Daniel Heery. I'm the Chief Exec of Charge My Street. And today I'm just going to explain a bit about what Charge My Street does and explain about some of the exciting plans that we've got coming up. So before I go any further, I'll just explain a bit about how I got into this. About 3 years ago, when I wanted to get an EV, wanted to get a charge point put in nearby, but there was just no option to do that with the local council. So got together with some friends, some other local people that were in the same boat. We all lived on terrace streets. We didn't have driveways, and behind me is the first EV charge point that we put in. So it looks a bit like a shoebox screwed onto the side of a community centre. But in fact, this has now enabled me to get an EV and a few other people that I know to get an EV. So it shows that if we actually capture some of that community spirit, we pool our resources, we can actually get this sort of infrastructure in, which helps us to switch, you know, to make that switch to a lower form of carbon transport. So I'm now going to just share my screen. While I'm doing that, could we do the poll, please, John?
Coming up.
Hang on, let me do that. Okay, and it's quite a short poll, so we'll move on. So basically then, Charge My Street, we're a community benefit society set up in 2018 and installing public EV charge points, because when we put these ones in Lancaster initially, we thought, well, there's loads of other places around the country that are in the same boat. About 40% of homes around the UK don't have a driveway, so they can't get a home charger put in. They need some sort of alternative provision. Community Benefit Society seemed the best route to go down, and that picture there is one of our early charge points that you can see. So we said, well, our vision should be to try and get one of these charge points within 5 minutes walk of people's homes, because when we did surveys, we found that about 70% of people were happy to walk about 5 minutes, drop off their car, pick up their car from a local charge point. So we thought, okay, well, that's quite an attainable sort of target. And then how could we, rather than try and go through the local council and the highways teams and all the problems that are associated with that, how could we actually use some community venues that are out there already to actually install these charge points? And so on the screen here, you can see we've got one in a local pub car park. This one is in a community hall in Broughton-in-Furness on the edge of the Lake District. And council did get involved. The county councillor launched that charge point when it was installed. So there is a role for councils to play, but it's they're finding it quite difficult to get involved in a lot of these projects. So what Charge My Street is doing is basically we'll go out, we'll work with communities to raise some funding through community shares, and then we'll go and install the charge point. We then sell the electricity to the EV user, the members of Charge My Street or customers that just drive up, and then we'll put a premium on top of that electricity, which pays for the costs of running the equipment. And this picture here is that's our newest charge point that was put in last week in Barrow, an area that previously had 0 charge points, one of the few in the country. So our model offers the approach where even if all the commercial providers and the councils are backing off and they can't see a way through, it gives the community or local people that really want to see this happen the tools to actually get on there and get the infrastructure in the ground. We've got a lot of community energy groups on the call today. So I suppose the real differentiator between what we're doing and a lot of organisations are, we see that there's quite a lot of demand side risk associated with EV charging. People can, they can drive anywhere to get to charge up, but they will always try and do it as close to home as possible if they're doing overnight charging. But that creates various headaches. So you've got the whole consumer experience needs to be looked after very closely in terms of the support, the billing, the marketing, but also site acquisition. This is, it's a very active challenge to manage a lot of these sites because petrol cars come and park in the spaces. You have a lot of politics around parking from local councillors, from other users of the sites, residents. But we see that some of the sites that I've shown you on those slides, they've got solar PV. At busy times of the day or on times when the sun's shining like it is here now, that PV is going back into the grid. We'd rather capture that and retain more of it locally. So we've got these energy communities. But also we see great opportunities around battery storage, vehicle to grid, so harnessing the power of those huge batteries in the cars to actually level out local demand. I suppose that the final point as well, as we see how this market is developing, it feels like we're coming to a bit of a fork in the road. We have large companies, the multinationals out there, very focused on still on their fossil fuel services that they're delivering, and they're trying to get a grip on this market. They're being quite aggressive. They're pushing what they can offer to local authorities to try and hoover up as much of that government funding which is going into this. But they're building quite tightly closed networks, so it's not in that spirit of collaboration, open business models, which we need. We need that innovation as we try and decarbonise transport. But that approach is mitigating against that. So we see that that route will lead us to a few years' time of having quite a sort of narrowly focused market with maybe a few big providers, and they'll have full control over that infrastructure. They'll be able to have a big say in how that those services are priced, which potentially doesn't do much for people who are trying to save money from this. So it's not a very democratic route. And we see the other route which we're trying to take. It's all around democratic ownership, financed by things like community shares. We see that there's a huge amount of talent in the community energy sector, and we want to try and bring some of those skills, some of that talent to bear on this challenge of how we bring together the energy which is being produced by organisations that are out there today, and this sort of EV charging infrastructure. And I'm really pleased that today we're starting Community Energy Fortnight, and we've got a new £5,000 support package for community energy organisations to work with us, so we can understand how these sort of community investment models will work with charge points. The sort of broader commercial models as well about how community energy groups can work with Charge My Street for mutual benefit. but importantly as well, how we scale this right the way up, because there's going to be huge demand for EVs over the next few years, huge demand on our electricity networks. How can we harness some of that sort of consumer choice about when they charge to reduce that demand or level that demand off? All these things are sort of swirling around, and we've got to try and come up with some really good models so that when it comes to scaling up rapidly, it's the community energy sector which is actually getting the best sites for these charge points, as opposed to the Shells and the BPs and those other big companies that are backed by infrastructure banks. How do we actually get it so that there's a viable community energy stake in this? There's details about all of this stuff, the programme, on the Charge My Street website. If you just go to the resources page. My colleague Phil Davis from Cumbria Action for Sustainability is managing all this, so his email address is there. If that's, if you're not from a community energy group, we are doing a webinar at 4 p.m. on the 30th of June, which is going to be looking specifically at charge point sites and how we find those. On the last presentation, we had solar spotters. Well, we have our charge point champions who are out there trying to find good sites for charge points and then helping to progress those out so we can actually get charge points in the ground and delivering services and helping people to switch. So if you've got sites, you can suggest them there. I think in terms of working with local authorities, we found the environmental health teams are really excited about charge points because of the impact on air quality. So that's, if you want to try and engage with them, that's the route in. My contact details are there, so if you've got any questions around that, please don't hesitate to get in touch with me. Or we've also got the hello@Charge My Street address as well. But please take us up on this offer, come and find out more about it, suggest some charge point sites, and I'll look forward to answering your questions a bit later. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Daniel, and fantastic ambition there that I'm sure all of us support and echo. Let me now introduce the third speaker that we have for the session, Afsheen from Repowering London. And just to confirm that I am giving you your 10 minutes speak. So if you want to go until 3 minutes past 4, you can absolutely do so.
I'm just going to share my screen. Right, oops, starting from the wrong slide. There we go. Hello, everyone, and thanks for the little bit of timing here. I hope to cover it in my time allocation. So as most of you know, I'm Afsheen. I'm co-founder, chief exec of Repowering London, and my slides are very similar to what Pete's been talking about, local opportunities, but in the context of what we're doing at Repowering and some of our work that we've been progressing. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Repowering, we're based in Brixton, in Lambeth, and we're very proud about the fact that our regions based in Brixton has made sure that we are diverse, inclusive, and fair and just in our engagement and participation as well. And a lot of the way our work stream aligns is really about keeping those values in place. And our vision is about kind of creating empowered communities across London, and we've got several work programs around renewable energy, local leadership training, reducing fuel poverty, and creating investment opportunities for local people. And a lot of community energy groups will be, will have similar work programs, but we've, the way we've worked it through is the way it knits together really well, and really brings together the community in the community energy. And I think that's been a real big opportunity in the current landscape. And I don't know for many of you, but for us, it's been a rat race. We've just been running, delivering, and trying to meet these unrealistic timescales with the feed-in tariff. And I actually feel slightly relieved now that we don't have those timescales imposed on us anymore. And I feel like this is time for us to take stock and for us to do a bit of reflective thinking, but also to really strengthen the community links and partnerships that we have developed. So our focus is around, or if you like, opportunities around the community momentum, the community demand and appetite to do something in their local area to address climate change. And part of that is also, you know, looking at our internal processes and operationalizing a lot of the work that we've been doing. Like we've delivered a lot of, you know, solar projects, established several co-ops, and how do we look at internal processes to scale so that we can help address the urgency and the scale required, you know, under the current landscape. And thirdly, you know, we are looking, this is part of our R&D, is really investing time into and resources into our innovation. And our innovation is really possible because of the partnerships and collaboration with both the community as well as the private sector organizations that has really helped develop and move these innovation projects forward. So that's what I'm going to talk about through my presentation. And I'd like to highlight, like, our focus of our volunteers has been fantastic. And I think we have definitely seen more volunteers coming forward with this raised awareness around the climate emergencies and the declarations, but also people really wanting to do something in their local area. And so what we're doing is really empowering these networks of volunteers, where volunteers are stepping up in the co-ops as directors and taking on real, you know, decision-making roles as well. And they are the people on the ground really spreading the word, connecting you know, projects to people and identifying new areas, new opportunities for us. So they are really, you know, the lifeblood of our projects. And in that vein, you know, community energy is not just about the energy, and you know, there is also many other interfaces that we have with bringing the community together, but also bringing different aspects of a low carbon lifestyle or sustainable lifestyle together. And our, again, our volunteers were like driving these kind of events and in the local area and bringing people together and just allowing for that connections, that sharing of knowledge, but practical action. And community energy group have a real strong role to play in not just creating energy projects and looking at one technology, but really looking at those interfaces as well. One of our models that I think is really working well for us is about that local employment and our champion model. So while a lot of community groups are volunteer-led, if you're able to find you know, funds or to pay champions to provide local employment, but also be able to be representative in your communities and really push forward projects. Having a local champion is fantastic. This model has worked for us in many ways. It's, you know, current under coronavirus crisis, our champions have been shaping and designing our response, you know, and how best we reach out to community groups, other networks, linking and really finding out those people who are in need of these desperate support services. So it's these champions, absolutely, they're the you know, they've got their ears on the ground. They know who to talk to and how to make those connections. And with their support, we have a helpline, a free helpline that's been promoted. We have put together a flyer that's gone into food parcels that have been distributed to households in the local area. And so people have access to our number, because we know a lot of the vulnerable and a lot of the hard to reach communities won't be able to look at things online and get the information that they need. So we've really made it accessible, and it's all been possible because of our community champions. And most of you know how Repowering has developed a youth training program that's been very successful in involving young people in creating the future of their communities, not only in the sense of tackling climate change, but also future leaders. And we continue doing that, but also again, here's where our partnerships with private companies and corporates have been really useful, because enable to sponsor our projects, to sponsor the training program, but also to identify new locations and sites where we can deliver it. More recently, we're trying to bring in theatre culture within it. So, we're running a theatre project for primary school children, because, they can't be part of a paid training work program, but it needs, we've adapted and tried to make it a bit more interactive, with young children in a pilot project in Hackney. So we're just trying to do things differently, but also embed ourselves deeper into the communities that we're working in. A lot of us obviously are looking at our corporate, generation projects and rooftop. In cities, it is, urban cities. It's really, really difficult making these projects stack up. But there are opportunities as well here. And one of the ways in which we're looking at delivering our schemes in London is with the support of, for example, carbon offset funds that local authorities have set aside, through their Section 106 schemes. You can access carbon offset funds, which could possibly look at supporting our community share offers, and which will enable us to still pay out at least a return to our shareholders, but also ring-fence a community fund so that money is recycled back into the community. So that's the model and the ideas that we are looking at moving forward. Obviously, we need to be very, very selective with the sites, because not all sites will lend itself to this way of working. And we've also been developing, and this is the innovation part that I was talking about, which is supported by our partners. I'd like to highlight the reason why we are, why should we get involved in local electricity supply models, which everyone has said is really challenging and area to be working on, and very, it's a difficult business proposition. But our role really here is driven by the fact that currently only people who own their flats, own their homes, or have money to invest in solar, have the ability to pay for that, are benefiting from this green revolution. And we want to see people living in multi-occupancy buildings, people who cannot afford their homes, people who cannot afford to invest in this technology to benefit from this green revolution, of renewable energy generation. That's why we're in it, and we're designing these schemes, and we play an important role, and with our corporate partners, in terms of really again creating that connection between what is a community-owned generation asset to the users in the building. We also hold a role of trust, this long relationship that we have with our consumers and the residents living in that block, and that puts a real big responsibility on us. And I must say that on our innovation trials, we have been supported as well by Ofgem in terms of making sure that consumers are protected. So this is why we're in it. And the one project that I really wanted to highlight today, where we've made some progress, is our community project. Community is a short form for Community Urban Neighbourhoods, Internal Trading of Energy, quite a mouthful. So community works really well. This program is being led by EDF. It's a virtual microgrid, essentially, where the local energy that's coming through the solar on the roof, which is owned by Brixton Energy Solar One, can be used by residents living in the block. This is a trial. It has been selected and gone through the Ofgem sandbox, and we work very closely with the innovation team in Ofgem. And the proposition here is to be able to save, for residents to see a savings on their energy bills. It's very early days yet. During the winter, we went through a process of recruiting trial participants. We've got 4 households. I know it's a very small number, but it has been really complicated designing the scheme. And again, as I say, if we didn't have EDF to put in the time and resources in terms of the legal and addressing legal issues, accessing, the regulatory issues, it would have been very difficult for us as Repowering or Brixton Energy on its own to be able to have designed the scheme so far. And what we have seen is from the early usage of this scheme, where the residents who have signed up, they are seeing benefits on their bills. So that's a really positive step. The individual residents who are part of the scheme are able to use an app which is on their phone, and they're able to trade and sell their electricity that they don't use themselves. So the surplus they're able to sell to the other participants. And this again is linked with the work that I was talking about earlier, like our community champions. It is our community champion who's a local resident in the estate who went out, spoke to the residents, helped bring them on board, and we also ran focus groups on how to shape and design the apps, the tools, communications with everyone. So there was a lot of groundwork that went in to develop this scheme. It's been 1 year in the making, if not more, in terms of just to get to this stage, and we're already seeing results, but there's more work to be done. The next phase, we'll be looking at installing a battery to then be able to maximize benefits back to the participants and the users in the building. This is very small scale, and as Pete was saying, these models need to be tested and developed before we can make them commercial and scalable.
Ashwin, I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up very, very quickly, please.
Great. I just wanted to highlight a new project, and again here the point is to highlight it's about collaboration and working with others, and we're part of a consortium, a huge consortium of partners, as you can see from the slide with all the logos there. This is Green Skies, funded by Innovate UK, new project where we're working with partners who are going to design and develop a smart energy system, which is about heating, cooling, EV charging, everything's thrown into it, really complex. Again, our role here is really about ensuring that this technical design is co-designed with local residents, with local people, and that there is an opportunity for local people to be part of the control, ownership, or management of this scheme when it's ultimately goes ahead. So just kind of highlighting the new opportunities for community energy groups to be participating in. And my last slide really is to knit it all together, because it might think, a lot of people come to me and say, well, I think you're doing too many things in too many places, and why are you doing this? And for me, the theory of change is really important, and the focus in a place like London, where we've got multiple localities and everyone's very precious about their locality and their area, is really about creating this local energy service model where community's at the heart. And for me, it's like an onion ring where you've integrated training, mentoring, fuel poverty work, rooftop solar, looking at demand, retrofit, demand flexibility, it's just multi-layers. And our challenge is about knitting these together, making them commercially viable. But ultimately, this is what we want to see: many of these kind of models surviving and thriving, providing benefits to communities across London and beyond, really. So that's me then. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashwin. And I suppose the struggles that you explain you've had around the community project illustrate what Tom was saying earlier around local energy supply. It's a great idea on paper. Unfortunately, under current regulation, it's incredibly complex to take on. Okay, so we have literally 5 minutes for 5 questions. So I'm asking for the collaboration of my speakers to keep it nice and short, please. The first question I've got really emanates from what seems to be a lot of frustration from some of the delegates here about managing to get local authorities' attention. So perhaps question to Pete and Ashwin, is there any quick advice on how to get a local authority's attention?
Can I go in first?
Sure.
Right. I think the community is the biggest asset in terms of grabbing your local authority's attention, and for them to see there is demand. There is demand and appetite from the community itself to do something, and you know, they are a tool. What we saw in North Kensington with our co-op in that area was that they were then challenging and lobbying the councillors, bringing them on board, and it's really important for us to not to kind of engage our MPs and local councillors. They're absolutely allies if you get them on board to then drive the machinery, if you like, of the local authority in taking notice and doing things. But don't ignore building the relationships with those key essential officers who are out there in every local authority, who really want to do something but are a bit tight because they don't have the resources. So I think it's about kind of create the demand, demonstrate the demand and the appetite, and build those links and those critical connections.
Okay, so building evidence that this is not just your project, it's the community that's sitting behind it. Okay. Pete, did you want to add something to that?
Just very, very quickly on the town and parish council side, Afsheen's covered really well that wider local authority, and we talked about it in the previous session. But in terms of town and parish councils, I think the role of the local authority itself is quite important, and I think in our area it's been quite instrumental in getting parish councils more engaged, having that positive local authority view. But from the parish council perspective itself, it's certainly helped presenting to the parish town council, this is going to happen. We're going to see local renewables. Do you want those local renewables in your area to be community owned? If they are, it's going to be easing your life a lot more, because we can bring the community with us. We have more chance of bringing the community with us than creating a lot of stress and tension at a local level. So I think the reality that onshore renewables is going to continue to grow, and the fact that we can help parish councils at a local level make it easier for them, I think if you have a parish council that's totally not interested, can help.
Excellent, thank you. Just turning to Daniel now. We've just a couple of questions. There's a comment here around how difficult the topic of EV charging point can be in terms of maintenance, in terms of finding the ideal site, etc. So what would you say to those of us who are thinking, gosh, this is too hard to do well, and this is taking on too much risk and responsibilities? And second question is, have you thought about a charging point for electric bikes?
Yeah, the answer to the first question, it is really hard. I mean, on the one hand, it's like screwing a box to the side of a building for people to charge their cars up, but there is so much wrapped up in that in terms of the politics, the finance, the business model, local feeling. All these things have to be taken into account. So it is hard, but what I say to the team is, it's like JFK said about putting people on the moon. We don't do it because it's easy. We do it because it's hard. So if we want to make this carbon transition for these sorts of communities, lots of terraced houses, we need to get our hands dirty. We need to bring our skills and our talents to bear on this problem, because we only have 10 years to sort out these issues of climate change. And it needs that really big push. We need to focus on it and tackle it. I suppose our view is that if we have specialists that take that on and do it, then they can share that expertise with the rest of the renewable energy sector, and hopefully we can make more progress than if we all go off and do it individually. I think the second point around electric bikes, it's something that we have looked at. We're not doing it at the moment. So I think most electric bikes can be charged up from a normal 3-pin plug. So most people will go down that route. I tend to cycle and walk most of the places anyway. I rarely use the electric car if I don't need to. So we do see that it's really important to have those electric bikes being part of that transport mix in the future.
Okay, thank you. So unfortunately, we've run out of time to answer other questions. So I might invite the panelists to try and answer some of those questions either in the Q&A if you can, or in the chat box, in order to keep those nice conversations going. And I'll introduce now the next speaker, which is who is Matthew Clayton from Thrive Renewables.
Hi, thanks very much. It's been a massively interesting and insightful afternoon. Thanks very much for everyone's contributions. Just by way of introduction, I'm the Managing Director of Thrive Renewables. We're a renewable energy company. We're a little bit different in that we're owned, we're owned by a community of over 6,500 people who've invested in us to make their money make a difference. And so, what we aim to do is to contribute to building new renewable energy projects and providing a rewarding stake for a wider community of individuals. So far, we've invested in 25 renewable energy projects dotted around the UK. We're currently funding 15 and building a further 3 at the moment. So, still growing, which is good. And what our portfolio does at the moment is it would generate enough electricity to power the homes of a city the size of Worcester, and is generating 75,000 tonnes of emission reductions every year. We invested between 500,000 and 15 million in individual projects, and we're really keen on plugging funding gaps and working with community groups, developers, and businesses to make a difference and get that next project built. And so, we're very pleased that over the last, we've been operating now for 25 years, and over that time we've done joint ventures, provided funding bridges, and also invested directly into community energy schemes. So we're very keen to continue to work with the sector. As Emma said several hours ago when the event started, we're very pleased to be sponsoring the Community Energy Fortnight this year. We think it's particularly important this year, and I'll go into a bit more detail why. I just encourage everyone to get involved. There's so many ways to get involved. There's tons of information on the Community Energy England website. There's lots of rich content coming up over the next couple of weeks, as well as individual ways to interact with the fortnight. So please do get involved. Again, it's been touched on by a number of the speakers, but we're living in very, very sobering times, and we're being hit by the dual challenges of the immediate crisis, but also the underlying climate change emergency. But I hope there's still there's reasons to be optimistic, and I think that what the immediate crisis has showed us is just how quickly things can change when they need to. Which, whilst no one would want the circumstances to be how they are, I think it is really a positive to take is the speed of change that can happen. And I think in addition to that, what we've seen in the electricity sector in its own right, we've been living in a live lab, which has escalated us forwards about sort of 10 or 15 years. The electricity demand has been 15-20% lower than it was this time last year. The grid mix, renewables has been providing over 50% of the UK's electricity the majority of the time for the last 2 months. And whilst that has made generated a lot of hair loss at the national grid, I think it's been a really, really helpful live lab experiment, and has really sort of advanced our understanding of how we can absorb that increased renewable penetration, which is going to be essential to meet the net zero transition. So I think that's a positive we can take from this. In addition to that, I think that one of the reasons we're particularly pleased to be sponsoring the Community Energy Fortnight is that we feel the role for both communities and individuals increases at a time like this. A lot of the financial system will be stalled at the moment because of just the crisis, the immediate crisis. And that is overlain on a position where they're still trying to get the broader sectors trying to get its head around the investments largely made on a fossil fuel based economy. So I think it's really incumbent on us as a sector, as individuals, as community energy, to keep the wheels on the energy sector in terms of the transition and the speed of change. I think I take a lot of comfort from what we've seen in the last couple of months with high winds with the Meemore wind farm, have successfully raised £4 million over the last couple of months, which you wouldn't have expected during a crisis like this. Similarly, Oxford's low carbon hub have raised £1.5 million. That's just closed. So I think there's still scope, there's still appetite, even with everything that's going on. And I think just looking back at last year's planning applications, just onshore renewables, so wind, hydro and solar, there were 4 gigawatts of renewables applications put in last year, which, if they were all to be built, which I'm, because of the fallover rate, it's unlikely, but that was £3 billion worth of capital that's needed to build that. So I think there's plenty of space for us all to play our part in the growth of the sector. And we're also really encouraged to see the CFD, the Contract for Difference consultation, that's been out and just closed. And in our response to that, we certainly lobbied quite hard for that sub 5 megawatt threshold to be removed, so that the smaller projects can also participate and benefit in the CFDs, because I think that's really important. Otherwise, the commercial realities get harsher for anything that sits outside that. And I'd urge anyone who's able to put a voice forward for that particular amendment to do that. But I think I'm really encouraged by the government in the last 12 months really does seem to have woken up to the role of onshore renewables, both in terms of cost and its contribution it can make to the fourfold growth in renewable generation that's required to get to net zero. So I think we've got, our eyes are very firmly set on the future, and I feel that that's very much reflected today with the innovative approaches which are being taken and the steps to keep things moving forwards. So that's pretty much it from me. I will just plug that Thrive is running a webinar on the 23rd of June, Tuesday the 23rd of June at 11 o'clock, where we'll be joined by other colleagues from around the sector to talk about funding of renewable projects. And I'd just like to say thank you very much to everyone and pass over to Emma. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Matt, and not only for your sponsorship of Community Energy Fortnight, but for your ongoing support for the sector as well. And thank you to all of you, 106 people still online at this time on a Friday. So thank you very much for sticking with us. I hope you enjoyed it and learned as much as I did. I will literally be 2 minutes wrap up. I'm not going to summarise everything that was discussed today, but whilst I do that, I think the team want to launch one more poll, which you can be answering as I'm doing my last couple of minutes. That should be appearing on your screen shortly. So thanks today to Community Energy, our sponsor of the conference, and our supporters, Electricity North West and Northern Powergrid. Thanks, Ollie, for posting in the chat. Ollie Pendred, all the links to the resources. We'll be sending those to all delegates afterwards, along with the recording. If you haven't seen, we now have a YouTube channel. So the recording from the spring conference of the Community Energy South is on there as well, if you want to have a look at another conference too that would discuss similar sort of topics. There was a request in the chat for a webinar on the local electricity bill during the fortnight, so that has now been agreed, and we'll confirm the date for that next week. And please do feedback on the event, obviously through this poll, but to us as well, and feed in for what you might want to hear at the wrap-up conference on the 29th of June in the afternoon. If you're not a member, please do join us, help us strengthen our collective voice. If you are a member, we have our annual general meeting on the morning of the 29th of June. Might not be the most enticing event in the whole Community Energy Fortnight calendar, sorry Charlotte, but it's a really important opportunity for you to learn more about what we're doing and help shape and get to know us all and help influence our future work. What else do I need to say? Do get involved in Community Energy Fortnight. Loads of brilliant events happening, upload your videos, share your thoughts. There'll be more resources going online, so do keep an eye on the website and the Twitter feed. And should we end the polling? Oh, good, okay, so that's a relief. So most people really enjoyed it. Those of you who didn't find it interesting or useful, please do let us know why. We're always wanting to improve and learn, so please do. Or constructive feedback, always welcomed. Just try not to be too rude, that'd be nice. And I think that's everything. So yeah, thank you. Keep in touch, enjoy your weekends, and hopefully see you at other events during the fortnight. Thank you, everybody.